The story began when the class needed one more member for the soccer team. Club selections were being decided, and everyone had to choose. A classmate turned toward Nobutu and asked about his choice for the club activities. He gave no particular answer because no club held any special interest for him. The classmate quickly concluded that any club would suit Hajime since he was mediocre at everything. The remark landed directly on him. A small realization settled over him. The classmate's judgment was not entirely wrong. The class still lacked one member for the soccer team. The MC lifted his hand and offered himself for the empty position. His name was Sada Hajime. Most classmates knew him by a different name. Number 2 had become the title that followed him more often than his real one. Girls around the class admired another Sada Hajime. They openly talked about how handsome he was and wished for a chance to get closer to him. Even the boys could not help paying attention to him. Someone excitedly added that he was amazing even without being part of the soccer club. Another student pointed out that Hajime excelled in both academics and sports. Students liked him. Teachers liked him. His personality only made him more popular. Then he introduced Sada Hajime as the perfect student. Standing among everyone else, he easily stood out from the crowd. A classmate looked at Satu and suggested that he would make a good match with Minamino Chinatsu. The idea spread naturally among the students as they compared the two popular classmates. Minamino Chinatsu was admired throughout the grade. Many students considered her the cutest girl in school. Her bright smile easily drew attention and could light up any room she entered. Not far away stood Hajime. While Chinatsu was admired as the brightest girl in the grade, he was often known as the second statue. This was the story of Hajime, the boy known as number 2 among his classmates. Yet this story was not about remaining second. It was about the boy called number 2 stepping beyond that place. This was the journey of Hajime, the story of how number 2 became number 1. Minamino approached Hajime with a bright smile. She noticed that Hajime did not have work that day and turned the simple observation into the beginning of a conversation. Minamino continued without hesitation and expressed her wish to spend time at Hajime's place. Her sudden request caught him off guard and left him searching for a response. The classroom fell silent as nearby students watched the exchange unfold. A classmate felt that calling Hajime the wrong Sadu after all this was going too far. The comment carried a hint of frustration. Minamino felt nervous as she waited for Hajime's answer. The invitation suddenly felt more important than expected. Hajime agreed without much thought. He welcomed Minamino and allowed her to come over. The answer immediately delighted Minamino. Her excitement showed clearly as she happily celebrated the invitation. The sight of Hajime standing together with Minamino shocked the class. Many students could hardly believe that number 2 was spending time with someone like her. Questions quickly spread through the room. Students wondered what kind of relationship existed between Hajime and Minamino. The reaction was exactly what anyone would expect. Some students tried to find an explanation. They believed Minamino must have mistaken Hajime for Class D Satu. That idea seemed easier to accept. Others quickly rejected it. She would never make that mistake when the other Sadu was standing right there. After plenty of discussion, the class finally reached its own conclusion. In their minds, the answer had already been decided. He also suggested stopping by a store on the way. Minamino happily asked what they would have for dinner. The visit to Hajime's home already seemed settled in her mind. Hajime agreed to stop by the store. Since meat was on sale that Friday, he thought it would be a good chance to take advantage of it. Minamino accepted the idea right away. The conversation flowed naturally, as it always did between them. Minamino grew more excited as she thought about the meal ahead. She could hardly wait and openly admitted how much she loved Hajime's cooking. Their conversation ended smoothly. Everything had gone well, and the plan was set. Hajime pointed out that texting during class was probably a bit much. Even so, he listened while she continued sharing her thoughts. She showed Hajime the messages she had been sending. She had already told her friends that she would not be going home with them that day. Her excitement kept growing, and she admitted that she could think of little else. Minamino apologized and admitted that the excitement had become hard to control. The anticipation felt almost unbelievable to her. As they walked together, Minamino finally confessed how nervous she had been. Keeping those feelings hidden had not been easy for her. Hajime understood what she meant. She brightened at that thought and responded with a playful smile. A question lingered in Hajime's mind. He could not understand why a cute girl like Minamino smiled so brightly whenever she was with him. The answer was not something that could be explained immediately. To understand it properly, the story needed to return to an earlier time. The memories led back to October. The beginning of everything waited there. Hajime was out for a run when something caught his attention. A familiar figure sat alone nearby and seemed troubled. As he looked closer, he realized the girl was Minamino from school. The sight of her sitting there by herself made him slow to a stop. He approached and called out to her. He asked if she was feeling sick and whether something was wrong. The moment she realized it was Hajime, she softly called his name. Their first unexpected meeting began there. Minamino noticed Hajime's outfit and asked if he had been jogging. She seemed curious about seeing him exercise alone. Hajime explained that even students without clubs still needed exercise. Running was simply part of his routine. She found that a little unusual. She wondered why Hajime did not just join a club if he stayed active anyway. Hajime replied that a club was not necessary for exercise. The answer left her smiling. The conversation then shifted to Minamino. Hajime asked if she was feeling unwell. She quickly denied it. That was not the reason. Minamino revealed the reason for her worry. She had found a small cat and believed it was a stray. The little animal looked weak and helpless. He looked at the cat and agreed. The kitten seemed fragile and in need of care. She explained that her mother had a severe cat allergy. Because of that, she could not bring the cat home. He finally understood what had been troubling her. Even so, she could not simply walk away after finding it. Leaving the kitten behind was not something she could do. The problem was never about school or work. It was the small stray cat resting in her hands. A memory surfaced in his mind. An important lesson remained with him. He had been told to think carefully about something, to feel it for himself, then to give it a chance. He accepted those words. The advice stayed with him and helped shape his decision. After a moment of thought, Hajime understood what needed to be done. He decided to help. Hajime suggested taking the kitten to a veterinarian first. After that, he would look after it at his own home for the time being. She froze in surprise. The answer was far beyond anything she had expected. She could only stare at him while trying to process what she had just heard. He became uneasy under her intense reaction. Her attention remained fixed on him and left him feeling awkward. Unsure how to handle the situation, Hajime focused on practical matters and prepared to call the veterinarian. He quickly called the veterinary clinic and received good news. The kitten could be examined right away. Relief finally appeared on her face. He immediately began preparing for the trip. He explained that medicine could be given if the kitten was sick. If it was malnourished, it could receive proper treatment as well. Without wasting time, he gathered what they needed. He planned to bring money from home and withdraw more from the convenience store if necessary. After finishing his preparations, Hajime handed over a towel and suggested wrapping the kitten to keep it comfortable. He then asked if she could come along. She was briefly caught off guard by the invitation. Minamino looked at Hajime in surprise and wondered if he had always been the type of person who helped someone in trouble. He then became concerned and remarked that she was making him worry about how she had viewed him until now. He quickly explained that the issue was not that. Hajime was simply being really nice at that moment, and she had never expected it. Hajime immediately wanted to know how she had seen him before. The question only made him more worried. Hajime remained unconvinced and wondered how cold she believed him to be. He strongly rejected that idea. That was not what she meant at all. She pointed out that Hajime had worried about her and called out to her even though they had never spoken before. To her, that was not something ordinary people always did. Hajime wondered if that behavior was really so unusual. She could only sigh at that answer. The reason Hajime seemed so kind was because he genuinely believed that kindness was normal. Hajime quietly considered her words. The realization left him momentarily speechless. She became embarrassed after saying what was on her mind. She lowered her head and repeatedly apologized while clutching the kitten close. As Hajime looked at her flustered expression, he noticed that she had turned red. For a brief moment, that sight made Hajime a little happy. Minamino noticed that Hajime's house looked new. Hajime explained that his family had moved there during middle school. When she asked if he had transferred schools, Hajime explained that his old school was still close enough to reach by train. She wondered if Hajime was coming inside. Hajime asked her to wait for a moment before going in first. She carried the kitten and assured Hajime that staying in the foyer was enough. Hajime agreed and accepted the kitten. While holding the kitten, Minamino worried about asking his parents about it. He quietly listened and understood. Minamino realized that nobody else was home. He assured her that there was no need to worry because he was the only one there. She thought about the situation and slowly understood. Bringing a girl home while the parents were away gave he a different image in her mind. Hajime quickly denied that such a thing had been his intention. She admitted that her image of Hajime was changing. A kind and charming boy suddenly seemed like someone much more experienced. She wondered if he was actually a playboy hiding behind a serious appearance. Hajime felt that his image had been completely destroyed. Hajime decided to get his wallet. She agreed to stay there and wait with the kitten. Hajime found the wallet and prepared to leave. Thoughts of her teasing still lingered in his mind, but there was no time to dwell on it. With the wallet finally in hand, he headed back downstairs. The kitten needed help. She sat with the kitten and gently encouraged the tiny little thing to keep going a little longer. She praised the kitten as a good little kitten and wished for it to stay strong. He returned and found she holding the kitten close. Watching her comfort the small animal made him understand why she was so popular. She was more than cute. Something about her naturally put others at ease. Hajime felt relieved that she had found a nice kitten. At the same time, a strange feeling appeared in his heart. Hajime answered that it was fine and reminded himself that they were strangers anyway. She apologized for making Hajime wait and asked if he was ready to go. Minamino then wondered if looking cute was more important than staying warm. The question sounded casual, but it caught Hajime completely off guard. As she adjusted her skirt, the question seemed completely natural to her. She quickly reassured Hajime that she was wearing short leggings underneath. That explanation only made Hajime even more flustered. Hajime admitted that he did not even know what those were. Looking took more courage than he had. The situation left him wondering what kind of test he was being put through. Minamino watched Hajime struggle and questioned whether he was such a gentleman or simply a coward. He reminded himself to get it together and focus on the conversation. She then mentioned that Hajime's house was very close to the school. He explained that he had applied to schools near his home. He then asked whether Minamino took the train to school. She explained that her house was 2 stations away from Toyota and only a short walk from Nishihachi. She added that the school was not far from her home. She admitted that if her house had been as close as Hajime's, she could have slept longer every morning. He responded that the difference was only 1 morning's worth of extra sleep. She explained that making bento lunches and doing makeup took time. She insisted that it was not as simple as it looked because girls needed to do all kinds of things. As they continued talking, Hajime's attention drifted toward a pair of middle school students walking hand in hand. The sight lingered in his thoughts. He wondered if it was really fine to walk around with her like this, and asked whether her boyfriend would get angry. She then revealed that there was no boyfriend to worry about, and laughed at the misunderstanding. Hajime accepted that answer, but quickly felt troubled by his own thoughts. Just because she did not have a boyfriend did not mean anything should change. She caught Hajime off guard and teased him for smoothly trying to gather information about her relationship status. She wondered why he wanted to know and insisted that she had only been protecting herself. Another thought crossed his mind as he realized that she was fun and easy to talk to. Soon afterward, Hajime decided to focus on the task at hand and asked her to wait while he withdrew the money. He reviewed the information he had gathered. The carrier would cost 1980 yen. Pet sheets would cost 2,000 yen. Medicine could reach 4,000 yen. A medical examination could cost around 6,000 yen. She worried about the cost and asked whether he could really cover everything. He answered that he had a job and assured she that there was no problem. After adding everything together, Hajime concluded that 30,000 yen should cover the expenses. As he looked at the money, a lesson from his uncle returned to his mind. Without money, proper health care could not be obtained. That lesson continued to echo within him. Money had no morality. Money expanded choices. Hard work ensured that options would never be limited. Money could buy freedom. He reflected on his uncle's words and realized that every part of that lesson was true. After finishing at the ATM, Hajime put away the money and reminded himself that she should not be kept waiting. With that thought, Hajime turned back at once and prepared to return to her. A sudden realization stopped him in place. He held the kitten close and offered an apology. He admitted that the situation could not have been handled alone. Minamino gently held the kitten in her arms, while Hajime watched from a short distance. As he looked at her, he finally understood the uncomfortable feeling that had been lingering within him. The veterinarian examined the kitten and found no serious problems. He explained that if the kitten ate well and slept well, then the kitten should be just fine. Hearing that news brought relief to Hajime and Minamino as they stood together and listened to the veterinarian's diagnosis. The veterinarian thanked Hajime and Minamino for doing such a kind thing for the kitten. She felt that the burden had been too much for one person to carry and offered to pay half of the bill. Hajime immediately refused. Hajime believed that accepting responsibility for the kitten also meant accepting responsibility for the expenses. She reacted with surprise and tried to object. She felt responsible for picking the kitten up and believed that Hajime had only been dragged into the situation because of that choice. To him, it was not a big deal. Hajime listened to Minamino's reasoning and finally agreed that splitting the cost would be fine. Relief immediately appeared on Minamino's face when Hajime accepted. She thanked Hajime from the bottom of her heart and praised Hajime as a truly kind boy. She worried about the future of the kitten and wondered whether keeping it until an owner was found would cause trouble for his family. He tried to answer, but struggled to find the right words. She then apologized and admitted that if speaking honestly was difficult, then there was no need to force an answer. After a brief pause, Hajime told her that there was no problem and that the matter was not important. Even while giving that answer, Hajime continued to think about that unusual feeling from before. She looked at Hajime's reaction and became concerned. She wondered whether something wrong had been said. He quickly denied it and assured her that nothing was wrong. Hajime asked whether he could tell her something. Minamino readily agreed and gave him permission to continue. He admitted that perhaps he was only meddling. He explained that if his understanding was mistaken, then they could simply leave the matter there. She accepted those words and assured him that it was okay. He gathered his resolve and told her that he did not hate her. The unexpected statement reached Minamino, and a small sound of surprise escaped her. Minamino looked at Hajime with confusion and wondered what he was talking about. Hajime asked Minamino to come outside and talk with him. Minamino agreed and followed. He told her that she could ignore his words if she wanted. Even so, he felt that Minamino tried too hard to get along with everyone. She listened in silence as he continued. He told her that everyone already liked her well enough. He admitted that his words might sound empty coming from a boy she barely knew. Even so, he wanted she to understand that they were his most honest feelings. Minamino stood speechless as he shared those sincere thoughts. She walked beside Hajime while the conversation continued beneath the open sky. She looked at him and found him to be a strange person. The thought escaped her naturally as she watched him. Hajime accepted those words without complaint and simply asked if that was so. Minamino recalled how Hajime always blended into the background. Rather than standing out, he seemed to make a deliberate effort not to stand out. Even among other people, Hajime quietly slipped into the crowd and avoided drawing attention to himself. Hajime understood that she had seen through him as well. Even though they had never spoken before, she had quietly been watching him from afar. He remembered one thing clearly about her. While everyone else called him number 2, she had never once called him by that name. Hajime reflected on her and realized that she always tried not to make enemies. At the same time, Hajime had spent his days trying not to be noticed. He looked at her and asked whether she was afraid of being hated. She considered the question and admitted that it was not exactly that. She hesitated for a moment, then asked whether Hajime had time after this. She still wanted to talk with him. He turned toward her and told her that he did not mind. Even so, he wondered what she wanted to discuss. Later the conversation continued, and she quietly watched Hajime at work. A thought formed in her mind as she observed him. He paused and asked what she meant. She suddenly remarked that Hajime seemed surprisingly good at housework. He then admitted that housework came naturally to him because he was always doing it. Minamino noticed that Hajime seemed to do housework all the time. She asked how he learned it and whether he had any siblings. Hajime answered that he had siblings and thought about them for a moment. Minamino told Hajime that he could talk to anyone if he just acted normally. She suggested that he practice with his young sister. He then shared that he also had a younger sister. Hajime noticed that Minamino seemed to have something more important to talk about. She hesitated for a moment and searched for the right words. She gathered her courage and suddenly asked whether Hajime would become her friend. She remained serious and waited for an answer. Her request was simple yet sincere as she asked Hajime to become her friend. Hajime could only respond with a confused ha while looking at Minamino in disbelief. Minamino Chinatsu had always been beautiful since she was young. She even worked as a model during middle school. Anyone who saw her would think she was pretty. That beautiful girl had just asked Hajime to be her friend. That simple request left Hajime quietly surprised. She gathered her courage and asked Hajime to become her friend. Hajime could only give a quiet response, as the unexpected request settled into his mind. He wondered if she meant ordinary friendship. After everything that had happened, he found it hard to believe they were still not considered friends. She had visited his house and shared so many moments with him. She quickly denied that misunderstanding. She was not talking about casual friendship. She wanted the kind of friendship where both people could truly relax around each other and speak honestly without holding back. Hajime finally understood. He asked if she had suddenly turned off her people-pleaser side. The question carried her confusion as she watched him from across the table. Minamino admitted that the request sounded strange. She wondered if such words really needed to be said out loud. Hajime looked back at her and pointed out that it was probably the most awkward way possible to ask for friendship. She admitted that she already felt comfortable around Hajime. The words came naturally and showed how much trust she had placed in him. Hajime listened in silence while she stretched with a bright smile. Her happiness was simple and honest. He watched her for a moment and finally gave an answer. He accepted her request and agreed that she could become his friend. He immediately rejected the idea and realized that was not what he wanted to say at all. After gathering his thoughts, Hajime politely asked whether Minamino would become his friend. The formal request sounded so serious that even Hajime seemed embarrassed by it. A quiet laugh escaped Minamino. The awkward wording amused her, and she could not stop herself from smiling. Minamino crossed her arms and happily accepted. If that was what Hajime wanted, then Minamino would gladly become his friend. Hajime suddenly smiled, and then asked why she looked so surprised. The unexpected expression completely caught her off guard. She stared at Hajime in disbelief, and wondered if he had really smiled just now. Hajime denied it at first. She immediately called out the obvious lie, and insisted that Hajime had definitely smiled. After a brief pause, he admitted that maybe there had been a small smile. He remembered how she had once viewed him as a cold and uncaring person who never smiled, and would not care even if something terrible happened nearby. The memory sounded ridiculous now. As Hajime started to walk away, she quickly stopped him. Minamino wanted to add something before the conversation ended. Minamino thanked Hajime for becoming her friend. The gratitude in her smile was genuine and carried more warmth than any words could express. Hajime looked at that smile and froze for a moment. A single thought crossed Hajime's mind. Her smile was dangerously charming and far more powerful than he had expected. At the same time, Hajime realized something else. She always worked hard to avoid being disliked by anyone. Even now, that kindness remained unchanged. She remembered that Hajime had said that before. She felt that was not really it. He admitted that the story was kind of long and hoped that was okay. He asked if dinner could be made while she told it. She was surprised and reminded her that it was a pretty heavy story. Hajime accepted it and explained that listening to the radio while cooking was normal. She remained puzzled. She treated Hajime's tragic backstory like noise and compared it to the radio, usually playing while cooking. He could only react in confusion. She suddenly realized that Hajime was making dinner. Minamino immediately wanted some and urged Hajime to start cooking right away. He watched in disbelief and realized that Minamino's people-pleaser mode was long gone. She listened as he explained that a few things had happened that could be considered bullying. Hajime quickly added that it was not a big deal and preferred to move on to the truly bad part of the story. She immediately believed that such bullying must have come from people who were jealous of her. He remembered that Minamino had been cute and likable. She had also worked as a model. There was no way someone so popular could have gone unnoticed. She casually revealed that many confessions had come during middle school. He paused while preparing the meal and listened carefully. She continued and explained that friends had eventually started pushing her to go out with someone. He quietly reacted while focusing on the story and the cooking at the same time. Hajime handed Minamino a cloth and asked her to wipe the table while the story continued. She accepted and prepared to help. She returned to the story and remembered the days of middle school. Some even insisted that she should simply date a boy first, and that real feelings might come later. Those words followed she again and again during that time. Many classmates had urged her to hurry and go out with someone. They reminded her that many boys were interested in her. Minamino remembered wondering whether dating someone would eventually lead to love. Even then, she could not truly believe it. A boy asked if she would be his. She could only give an uncertain answer and reluctantly agreed. The next moment, the boy suddenly moved closer and reached for her. The distance vanished far too quickly. She was startled and immediately reminded him that they had agreed to start as friends and take things slowly. She firmly believed that keeping that promise was part of a girlfriend's duty. She froze at those words while confusion spread across her face. She faced a situation that felt wrong. She questioned whether dating someone meant doing things that felt uncomfortable. She immediately refused and made it clear that such things were unwanted. She apologized and hurried away from the classroom. The boy remained behind in shock. She stood alone while listening to those voices. Frustration quietly grew as the same cycle continued again and again. Not long after that, rumors spread through the school. People heard that the two had broken up. The whispers quickly changed into new pressure. People insisted that Minamino should hurry and go out with someone else. Some even encouraged her to date boys simply because they seemed good enough. They urged her towards someone new and claimed that the next one would be better. People quickly moved on after hearing that she had broken up with another boy. The rumors spread through the school. Students whispered that she had a new boyfriend every day. Cruel words followed, and some began judging she without knowing the truth. Alone with those thoughts, she quietly clenched her hands. The weight of those rumors remained with her long after the voices faded. She admitted that the whole situation had honestly made her angry. All of it frustrated her more than anything else. Hajime listened quietly and gave a small response while continuing to pay attention to every word. Even without a boyfriend, people constantly encouraged Minamino to date someone already. The pressure never seemed to stop. She explained that whenever someone confessed, those feelings deserved a proper answer. Ignoring them was never an option. She spent those days eating lunch and spending time after school with different people who confessed their feelings. Each meeting became another obligation. Hajime looked down in thought while listening to the story. He became certain that she had taken every confession seriously. She explained that eventually she started rejecting everyone who confessed to her. She admitted that she stopped talking to boys entirely. She paused while wiping the table. Hajime listened quietly as the story continued. She recalled that her best friend suddenly confronted her. Hajime looked at Minamino with surprise as she brought up that memory. She remembered her best friend pleading for Minamino to stop stealing him from her. She stood in confusion while the surrounding students watched and whispered among themselves. The sudden attention only made the situation more difficult for Minamino. She heard her friend ask whether she could have any boy she wanted. She then faced the painful accusation that even her friend's boyfriend had been taken from her. She tried to deny the accusation. She could not believe the claim that her friend's boyfriend had been stolen. Hajime could only think that none of it made sense. He had no idea what her friend was talking about. The accusation grew harsher as her friend insisted that the breakup happened because she had seduced him. She cried out in pain after being struck. Another accusation followed as someone demanded to know why Minamino was flirting with other girls' boyfriends. Minamino denied it and insisted that she had never flirted with anyone. She tried to explain that she had only sewn a button back onto a boy's uniform because he could not do it himself. She even reminded them that the boy was not good at sewing. The girl accusation that she had already stolen many girls' boyfriends and was now trying to take another one. The word spread through the crowd as everyone watched her. She could not understand why any of this was happening. The situation no longer depended on the truth. She realized that to the spectators, the one who cried became the victim. The one blamed for those tears became the villain. A boy approached Minamino after breaking up with his girlfriend. The boy stood before Minamino and tried to draw closer to her. She refused him without hesitation. She believed that should have been the end of it. The boy demanded an answer and asked why she rejected him. The boy claimed that he had broken up with his girlfriend for her. She stood speechless as the accusation continued. The boy insisted that she had led him on if she never intended to accept his feelings. The anger grew even stronger. The boy lashed out and declared that Minamino would never be wanted again. She could only endure the cruel words directed at her. A boy suddenly grabbed her and pulled her close. Minamino cried out in shock as the situation turned frightening. She could only wonder what the boy was doing. The rumors eventually reached a teacher. The teacher knew about everything and stepped in before things became worse. She was saved from the situation. The teacher warned the students to learn from the incident and stay away from boys who were already in relationships. The teacher insisted that proper relationships were important. Those words struck she deeply. As she listened, she felt something inside her break. The weight of everything Minamino endured remained in his thoughts. Hajime listened to her story and felt that it was truly awful. He felt that as a man he should apologize for everything she had suffered because of others. She held a hand against her chest as warmth spread through her heart. She thanked Hajime. Those words reached her heart more deeply than she expected. She admitted that she was only able to tell this story because he could say things like that. He apologized because he could only listen. Hajime believed that some pain could only be truly understood by those who had lived through it. She smiled faintly as she listened. The painful memories remained with her, yet she seemed relieved to have finally shared them. She was glad that Hajime listened. She offered to help while staying by his side. She explained that she had been attending an escalator school. She applied to their current school because she no longer wanted to stay there. Hajime reflected on her story. He found it surprising that even after growing tired of her notoriety, she still ended up becoming popular. Minamino smiled and admitted that nothing could get past Hajime. She believed Hajime was completely right and thanked him for noticing what others missed. The entrance ceremony began, and students wondered if there were any cute girls there. She immediately drew attention. Some thought she looked like a doll. Others wondered if she already had a boyfriend. Some even thought they might fall for her. When someone asked her name, the answer was Minamino Chinatsu. He reflected that his status had been decided in an instant. The tension building inside his melted away when she spoke. Her words made him realize that he had been trying too hard. Minamino suddenly appeared close to him. Her cheerful greeting startled him, and only an awkward sound escaped. She revealed that he was the first person who had ever heard this story. The confession carried special meaning, because no one else had been trusted with those memories before. He stood close while holding the meal, and admitted that the distance between them felt close. He wondered if she was feeling a little better. She looked over the dishes and reacted with surprise. She had expected something small, but found a full-course meal instead. He prepared far more than she had imagined. She noticed every dish on the table and praised the meal. She pointed out that everything looked wonderful except for the salad, which had been frozen. She took a bite and remained impressed by the meal Hajime prepared. The food before her exceeded expectations, and her reaction showed how much she enjoyed it. Minamino tasted another bite and found it so good. Satisfaction spread across her face as she continued enjoying the meal without hesitation. He watched Minamino eat and quietly expressed happiness. Hearing that something he made was delicious brought genuine joy to him. She thanked Hajime for the food as she prepared to leave. Hajime told her that if she ever wanted to talk again, he would listen. The offer carried warmth and sincerity. He reminded her that they were friends. Minamino softly accepted those words and answered with a quiet agreement. She thanked him once more and praised the meal as great. Her cheerful gratitude reached Hajime clearly, and another surprised response escaped him. He suggested trading phone numbers so he could check in on the cat. She agreed, and the exchange was completed without hesitation. She thanked Hajime once again for taking the cat in. Hajime offered to walk Minamino home, but Minamino felt like walking alone and politely declined. He accepted the answer while watching she leave. Minamino stepped outside and reflected on what a crazy day it had been. The quiet street contrasted with everything that had happened earlier. As she continued walking, a tired sigh escaped her. Despite sharing so much with Hajime, she realized that not everything had been taken off her chest. She reflected that the day had started as one of the worst days of her life. All of a sudden, she learned from her mother that the divorce had finally been finalized. The news arrived without warning and changed everything. She remembered that her father had left the previous spring and had never returned home. For all that time, she wondered how he could abandon the family so easily. Her mother finally admitted that her father had been having an affair. She already had a feeling that this was the truth. Her mother continued speaking badly about her father. The bitter words only made the situation feel heavier. Money and legal matters filled the conversation. There was talk of alimony and child support, but she no longer wanted to hear any of it. None of those things mattered to her anymore. Minamino stepped into school each day and became a version of herself that no one could feel threatened by. While students approached her with requests for her number, she turned them away with a bright smile and the firm belief that her phone had room only for the number of a future boyfriend. With that same gentle certainty, Minamino held on to the belief that she would never steal someone's man. Her smile remained unchanged. Minamino could not understand love. Even after a mountain of boyfriends passed through her life, she still could not grasp what love truly meant. She believed that understanding love had become impossible after everything that had happened in her family. She wondered where her real self had gone. That question lingered within her without an answer. At school, she did everything possible to avoid being seen as a threat. At home, her mother constantly complained about money. No place remained where she could remove the mask she wore. No place remained where she could simply be herself. She read a message from Hajime asking whether she would be fine alone. He wanted to walk her to the station if possible. That small act of concern stayed with her. She thought about him. Many people would probably look at Hajime and believe he was not someone who stood out or turned heads. She could not accept that conclusion. In her eyes, there was nothing second about Hajime. He was someone who listened without judgment and reached out when others turned away. She remembered how Hajime allowed her to be herself. Hajime listened to every frustration she carried and gave those feelings a place to rest over a warm meal. Minamino looked back on that small cat and saw her own reflection within it. Both she and the cat longed for someone to save them from their loneliness and pain, even while believing that no savior would ever appear. Minamino's memories returned to the day everything began. Hajime approached her and recognized her as Minamino from the same class. She remembered how Hajime accepted the cat. At that moment, it felt as though Hajime had accepted more than the cat. She felt as though she too had been given a place where she belonged. That realization caught Minamino completely off guard. She could only wonder what had just happened to her. Morning arrived quietly. The television continued playing while Hajime remained asleep beneath his blanket. A sudden vibration broke that silence. He stirred in bed as the sound of his phone reached him. He grabbed the phone from beside him and glanced at the screen. The early hour drew a faint reaction from him. Minamino had sent Hajime a message early in the morning. She asked whether he was awake and whether a name had been chosen for the cat. She also suggested that both of them keep thinking of possible names. Hajime looked through their messages from the previous day. She had thanked Hajime and was glad to call him Satu. When the topic turned to the cat, he felt that Minamino should choose the name because she had found it. She still wanted both of them to think of a name together. She thanked Hajime for giving her his phone number. Since both had never spoken to each other at school, they felt it would be better to keep things the way they were. Neither Hajime nor Minamino wanted to attract attention. Maintaining the same distance at school seemed like the safest choice. After reaching that understanding, both of them quietly agreed. She revealed that Hajime was the first person to receive her phone number since the start of high school. She warned Hajime not to share it with anyone, and playfully added that losing it would be enough reason to quit his job. When Hajime reacted with surprise, she brushed it off as a joke, yet the fact remained unchanged. The thought lingered in her heart. Hajime possessed a phone number that nobody else had. For some reason, that simple fact made she feel special. The memory faded, and Hajime returned to the present. Hajime remembered sleeping on the sofa because he had been worried about the cat. Hajime lay beside the cat and reflected that raising a pet was no simple matter. A photo of the cat soon arrived on Minamino's phone. Hajime informed she that the cat was doing well, though a name still had not been chosen. The sight of the fluffy cat immediately drew a response from her. The cat looked unbelievably cute in her eyes, and she admitted feeling jealous that Hajime could wake up beside such a fluffy little creature every morning. Her reply arrived so quickly that Hajime could not help smiling at the screen. With the conversation continuing so naturally, he turned his attention to the day ahead. Her words lingered in his mind. Leaving the cat alone during school hours was one matter, yet leaving it alone while working felt far more difficult. The small animal had already become a concern that stayed with him. Another message soon arrived from her. After talking about waking up beside such a fluffy little creature, Minamino carefully asked whether visiting the cat again that day would be a bother. The phone stayed in his hand as he continued thinking. No answer came immediately. She asked whether visiting the cat again that day would be a bother. Hajime answered with a message saying that there was something to discuss. The serious wording immediately caught her attention. When she arrived, she happily greeted Shiro-chan. She pointed out that the wording felt suggestive. They had only met 2 days earlier, so such a message felt unexpected. She teased Hajime by wondering whether using suggestive wording was some kind of hobby for him. She also reminded Hajime that only 2 days had passed since their first meeting. The next moment, her attention shifted completely. She asked Hajime what his friends thought about everything. The question came after Hajime changed into more comfortable clothes and returned to the room. She revealed that her classmates had asked about her time after school. To avoid attention, she simply told them that she was busy taking care of a cat at home. He lightly accused her of relying on half-truths. Calling the situation cat-sitting was not completely wrong, yet it left out important details. Even so, Minamino quickly set the matter aside. After gathering her thoughts, she turned toward him and asked whether a question would be all right. With permission granted, she finally asked the question that had been on her mind. She wanted to know whether he was the only person living in the apartment. She immediately understood what he meant. She explained that his parents were on an overseas business trip. It was that kind of situation. He then asked her if she could come and see Shiro while he was at work. The request would be a great help to him. He told her that she could watch television or play any games she wanted while staying there. He also showed the apartment layout. He pointed out the living room and bathroom and asked her to stay within those areas. He ended the explanation with one request. He asked her not to go anywhere else. Minamino playfully asked if Hajime's room was off limits because a healthy high school boy might be hiding questionable books under the bed. The teasing remark carried a mischievous smile. Hajime had already expected that answer. He firmly told Minamino not to enter a healthy high school boy's room, and added that there was nothing under his bed. Hajime even considered such suspicion childish behavior. He accepted the key and jokingly mentioned that his computer was a different matter. She held out the key and asked if Hajime was truly certain about this decision. Her trust remained unwavering. Hajime wondered if entering the house of a girl living alone was really acceptable. The thought lingered in his mind. She had already seen what kind of person Hajime was with her own eyes. That certainty was enough for her to place her trust in him. She then reminded Hajime that those words were usually meant for her side. The response came naturally. She asked whether he had work now. The question turned toward his job. Hajime revealed that the Yakitori Izakaya near the park was his workplace. His hours ran from 6 to 10. She wondered if Hajime worked as a server. Hajime explained that he was kitchen staff. She realized that being kitchen staff explained why he was so good at cooking. As the conversation continued, Minamino felt that it was dawning on her how little they knew about each other. Even with their growing connection, there were still many things left to learn. He remarked that learning about another person slowly was normal. She then questioned whether Hajime was hiding something. He immediately denied it and insisted that he would never do such a thing. She noticed the expression on her face and reminded her not to make that face at school. She accepted that Hajime had work and that it could not be helped. She then promised that Hajime would make it up to her next time. The promise left Hajime wondering if she was really serious. She smiled with quiet satisfaction as the conversation came to an end. She waved goodbye and looked forward to seeing him again soon. Those simple words lingered with him and drew a quiet reaction from Hajime. Minamino told Hajime that she would be back soon. Hajime found himself wondering how long it had been since hearing those words. The memory surfaced naturally as the feeling remained in his heart. 2 weeks had already passed since Hajime took Shiro in. The days continued to move forward. Year 1 Class A began another ordinary day on October 21st. Sada Hajime and Horikita Masami had been assigned as the students on day duty. After homeroom ended, the teacher asked the students on duty for an extra favor. Hajime thought about his schedule and realized work would not start until later. That meant there was enough time for him to handle the task without any trouble. Horikita Masami apologized and explained that volleyball club practice was waiting. Practice came first and prevented her from helping further. The teacher asked whether anyone could take Horikita's place. Hajime believed there was not a single soul who would volunteer. Hajime then offered to do it. As a member of the Going Home Club, he was available to help. Minamino raised her hand and declared that Hajime could count on her. Her words made it clear that she intended to help with the task as well. The teacher accepted and asked Hajime to clean the reference room. Hajime agreed, though the request surprised him. Minamino turned back toward him. A small smile appeared on her face, and her gaze lingered on him for a moment. A classmate suddenly called out to number 2 and pulled Hajime from that brief moment. The classmate grinned and declared that it was Hajime's lucky day. The classmate even offered to cover for Hajime. Anyone unwilling to miss the chance for alone time with Minamino could leave the task behind without hesitation. He replied that cleaning was a pain, but he might as well enjoy the perks for himself. The comment made Ishizawa pause on the word guard. Ishizawa asked whether Hajime was chasing after Minamino as well. He wished Hajime good luck and remarked that Minamino's guard was tighter than a prison's. Hajime then denied chasing after Minamino. According to Hajime, they simply belonged to the same club. Hajime wished Ishizawa good luck with practice. Even after giving that answer, his thoughts remained steady on the matter. Hajime thought that if Ishizawa had asked 2 weeks earlier, he probably would have agreed to switch. Things were different now. A thought crossed Hajime's mind. Ishizawa would probably make quite a face if he learned that Hajime and Minamino exchanged. Ishizawa called out to number 2 after noticing Hajime suddenly stop moving. Messages every day and even ate dinner together. Ishizawa remained puzzled and wondered why Hajime had frozen all of a sudden. Hajime quickly dismissed it as nothing. Minamino appeared before Hajime and pointed out that he was late. She waited by the doorway while watching Hajime. He remarked that she could thank his fan club for that. A message then arrived declaring their natural first interaction complete. The message suggested going together because it was strange that both of them were on duty. He immediately judged that there was nothing natural about that interaction. She reacted with disbelief and could only think that such a thing was impossible. Hajime pointed out that when nobody raised a hand, either he should have done the task alone, or the teacher should have forced someone to help. According to him, that outcome would have made far more sense. Minamino greeted everyone once again with bright energy. Classmates called out, and Minamino returned every greeting. She then turned toward Hajime and asked how many greetings that made now. Hajime was reminded once again of how popular she was. Even Hajime, who knew it was an act, found her demeanor completely convincing. Together they arrived at the reference room and prepared to begin their duty. She leaned closer and asked how it felt to be alone in a closed room with a beautiful girl. He considered the question and concluded that it felt about the same as being alone in his house with a beautiful girl. She accepted the answer at first and naturally agreed. A moment later, she realized that answer was simply business as usual for him. The realization left Minamino speechless while he remained completely unaffected. Hajime asked why Minamino believed this place would change anything. He pointed out the shredder and explained that there were two of them, so she could use that one. As they worked, Hajime noticed a bunch of misprinted tests and brought them over. She stood with her arms crossed and quietly pouted while watching Hajime continue his work. After a long sigh, her formally declared her dissatisfaction. He continued sorting and shredding documents while Minamino's complaint lingered in the room. Hajime glanced at Minamino and finally addressed her expectations. She urged Hajime to hurry up and finish so they could leave. She continued searching for a reaction, but found no good result at all. Hajime questioned what she had been hoping for. He wondered if she expected a blush like a baboon, and urged her to be serious. Minamino's plan failed once again, while Hajime remained completely unaffected by every attempt. She puffed her cheeks in frustration when nothing happened. Hajime noticed that even when she was angry, she was still prettier than anyone else. He wondered if such beauty could really be explained by mere genetics. She complained that he was so lame. She pointed out that she was a girl and he was a boy. They were alone after school in a remote room. According to all the light novels Minamino had read, this should have been the moment for Hajime to make a move. Minamino insisted that Hajime should totally be making a move right now. She moved close to Hajime once again. He thought that she was always getting close like this. He remarked that it was no wonder people got jealous. He even imagined Ishizawa eagerly offering to take his place. She repeated the word jealousy while thinking it over. Hajime explained that Ishizawa had pressured him to trade places after he volunteered. She wondered if Hajime meant Ishizawa. She noted that Ishizawa had been staring at her a lot lately, and that she could feel him leering whenever he looked at her. Minamino then apologized and returned to cleaning. He silently questioned whether Ishizawa had really been looking at she that way and wondered if his own safety was at risk. She admitted that she was really happy Hajime had not traded places with him. He wondered if Minamino would have been fuming if he had done that. She immediately declared that of course she would have been. She asked for whose sake Hajime thought she had replaced Mizami. Hajime answered that this was exactly why she was here. She responded with a pleased laugh as the conversation continued without restraint. He had to admit that these laid-back conversations with Minamino were really nice. Hajime decided to return the key. She planned to get her bag from the classroom first. He agreed and Minamino responded with a pleased smile. Minamino explained that she was going shopping with her friends, so she could not come over today. He acknowledged it with a simple reply. As she left, Hajime thought about reading his book until it was time for work. A sudden realization struck Hajime. The book had been left in his desk. A voice called out to number 2 from nearby. Hajime noticed the call and wondered if they were talking about him. Mizami admitted that if it had been Class D SATA coin, then she would have gone in Minamino's place. Mizami apologized to her and confessed that she had never expected Chinatsu to take her place. She brushed it aside and told Mizami not to worry about it. She then asked what had happened to volleyball. Mizami explained that it was a self-practice day and that she did not want to risk an injury while cleaning. Mizami revealed that she had never talked with number 2 before and thought it would have been awkward. Minamino quietly admitted that she did not like it when people called Sato-kun. Mizami watched Minamino's reaction in silence as the meaning behind her words became clear. She described Hajime as probably a kind and normal guy. Mizami, the angelic Chinatsu, appeared as she supported him without hesitation. She quickly explained that she had not been trying to imply that Hajime was a bad person or anything. Hajime was compared to Class D Satu. The praise surrounding him continued without end. He stood as the ace of the basketball club. He was hot. He was smart. Satu was described as a prince. Mizami and the other girls eagerly agreed with every word. Their excitement only grew stronger. Minamino listened quietly, while small signs of delight appeared around her. Nearby, Hajime realized that he had completely missed his chance to grab his book. Ishizawa praised Minamino and remarked that she was really kind. Ishizawa then suggested that if Minamino stayed nice to a guy like Hajime, then he could fall in love before long. Ishizawa also asked if Hajime had been leering at Minamino while she was cleaning up. The others immediately reacted to Ishizawa. His sudden interruption drew attention from everyone. The mention of Ishizawa made another fact clear. Ishizawa had skipped out on practice. Minamino remembered an earlier correction and firmly repeated it. Hajime's name was not number 2. His name was Sadu. Meanwhile, Hajime heard those words and paused. She added that Hajime had not leered or done anything weird. She stated with confidence that Hajime had been a gentleman and that they had fun talking. Hajime listened in silence as Minamino spoke so naturally about the time they had spent together. Ishizawa brushed the matter aside and argued that however men might act, all men were perverts on the inside. The others reacted to Ishizawa's bold claim, while the conversation shifted once again. Ishizawa continued joking and pointed out that even Hajime admitted he was number 2. While Hajime immediately disagreed with that description and inwardly rejected the claim that he would ever admit such a thing, the discussion shifted to Sato. Minamino learned that Sato had played basketball in middle school. Mizami reacted with surprise and wondered if that was true. Ishizawa explained that when Class D's Sato joined the team, Sato chose to quit instead. Hajime fell silent as the conversation continued around him. Ishizawa described Sato as the kind of person who placed himself in second place. Hajime decided that he had heard enough. With that thought, he started to leave. Minamino listened with interest and found the story fascinating. A curious smile appeared on Minamino's face as she wondered whether Sato had actually said that himself. Hajime paused outside the classroom and wondered if Minamino was angry. Ishizawa answered her and admitted that the story had not come from Sato himself. Minamino smiled and asked what came next. She then pointed out that Ishizawa had selfishly decided Sato's feelings in the way that amused him the most. Mizami reacted with surprise as the mood of the conversation suddenly changed. Number 2 had been pretty serious about basketball back in middle school. Ishizawa reasoned that Hajime would have been crazy not to join the club in high school if basketball truly meant that much to him. He continued that Sato had already surpassed Hajime in looks. He added that Sato had also surpassed Hajime in academics. He concluded that if Hajime lost in basketball as well, then perhaps his pride would not have been able to handle it. He insisted that Hajime had no need to say such things himself, because the context already revealed the answer. Minamino accepted the explanation and admitted that it made sense. She then considered another possibility and wondered whether Hajime might have had other reasons for quitting that nobody had thought about. Mizami and the others listened quietly as Minamino continued. Minamino admitted that the only thing she knew for certain was that she had enjoyed talking with Hajime earlier. Those words left Ishizawa unsettled. Minamino then expressed her displeasure. The fact that Ishizawa had shamelessly belittled Hajime in front of her irritated her. Caught off guard, Ishizawa hurriedly tried to back away from the discussion and asked everyone to forget what had been said. Hajime looked on in surprise as the situation unfolded. Soon afterward, Hajime quietly stepped away and headed out through the toilet door. Hajime walked away while remembering Minamino's words. He thought Minamino was foolish. He wondered why she had not ignored Ishizawa. He wondered why she would risk her good reputation for someone like him. Hajime remembered telling Minamino to keep her cool around people she disliked. Even so, those words no longer mattered much to him. Hajime knew there had been nothing he could do. As he walked away, he tried to keep his happiness under control. On her day off, Minamino arrived at Sato's house for the first time. The unfamiliar place stood quietly before her as she took in the sight of his home. Minamino greeted Hajime with a cheerful hello and a bright smile. Hajime welcomed her into the house and stood staring at her for a brief moment. Minamino noticed that the cat was asleep as usual and wondered if it would still remember how to wake up. Hajime appeared certain of it, while she remembered wanting to play with the cat. She turned her attention elsewhere and decided to try the game that he had recommended. She listened as Hajime explained that the game had a great story. Those words immediately sparked her interest, and she eagerly decided to give it a try. The two spent time together in comfortable silence. Minamino felt relieved that Hajime remained the same as always and had never tried to force any changes between them. Yet while they sat side by side, Minamino found herself wanting their relationship to change at least a little. That thought lingered in Minamino's heart as she quietly glanced toward Hajime. Today felt different from every day before. Minamino asked whether she and Hajime were friends. Hajime considered it for a moment and admitted that they probably were. She accepted that answer and called it good. But she pointed out that she had learned quite a lot about her, while still hardly knew anything about him. Hajime immediately rejected that claim and insisted that it was not true. The long silence made Hajime uncomfortable. Confused by Minamino's reaction, Hajime finally asked what was wrong and pointed out that Minamino was staring at him like a crazy person. She suddenly protested that it was not fair. The unexpected complaint caught him off guard and left him wondering what exactly was unfair. She knew that he was not obligated to confide in her. Even so, she still wanted him to. She revealed that she had heard from a certain source that Hajime used to play basketball. That certain source turned out to be Sato. The revelation left him speechless as she continued looking at him with a determined expression. Minamino admitted that she would accept it if Hajime wanted to keep something hidden. He explained that he had not been hiding anything. He simply was not the type to brag about having played basketball in middle school. Minamino agreed that his explanation sounded true. Hajime then added that if the matter was not a secret, then she was free to ask about it. She immediately leaned forward and asked whether she could really hear the story. He saw her eagerness and calmly gave his permission. Minamino fell silent for a moment before a question finally reached him. She wanted to know why Hajime had quit playing basketball. Hajime answered with a quiet correction. Hajime revealed that he had not quit. She tilted her head in confusion as Hajime's words caught her by surprise. A quiet realization spread across her face as Hajime revealed that he still played basketball. She listened closely while Hajime explained that work waited after school, and because of that he could not commit to the club. She listened closely as Hajime explained that a senpai from work had introduced him to a group that played basketball twice a week. He added that the games were street ball and followed their own style. Minamino's face brightened with excitement as Hajime revealed that he still played basketball. She could no longer hide her interest and wanted to see it for herself. The thought struck her unexpectedly because she had never even considered that he still played. Hajime fell silent as she suddenly declared that she wanted to watch him play basketball. The idea felt so distant that could not picture her watching him at all. Hajime accepted her words without much resistance and simply asked whether Minamino wanted to go right away. She answered with complete certainty that of course she wanted to go. Her excitement overflowed freely. The next moment brought them to Volti. The place stood ready for the game that she had been eager to see. Hajime entered with Minamino at his side, and she observed that the vibe there felt really mature. Several people noticed Hajime immediately. Their attention shifted toward him, and then toward her. Surprise spread through the group as they realized that Hajime was with a girl. The group stared at Minamino with open amazement. One called her a freaking cute girl, while another nearly lost his composure and muttered that she was an actual JK. Hajime leaned closer to Minamino, and he reflected that the people there could be crude, blunt, and vulgar, yet they were still good people. Quietly admitted that Volti was a place where he could truly feel comfortable. Minamino soon became the center of attention. Someone admitted that she had really surprised him when she walked in and wondered if she was a model. Another stepped forward with a cheerful smile and suggested exchanging contact numbers as a token of friendship. Hajime watched the scene unfold in silence. The growing excitement around her only reinforced his belief that those guys had gone much too far. Hajime took Minamino by the hand and guided her away. Hajime brought the teasing to an end and warned everyone to stop hitting on his friend. He reminded them that Minamino was still in high school and declared that he would report them if they continued. Hajime apologized to Minamino and assured her that she would be safe with him. The others quickly backed down and admitted they had only been joking. They begged Hajime not to report them and laughed awkwardly. Minamino quietly accepted the explanation. Minamino's gaze drifted down to the hand holding hers. The warmth of Hajime's grip remained firm and natural. Minamino looked ahead in surprise. A voice welcomed them as they arrived at the court. Then, Yuji and Misaki were introduced as the owners of Voltex darts and basketball. They welcomed the pair with warm smiles as Hajime stood beside Minamino. Hajime introduced her and revealed that he had brought a friend with him today. Hajime explained that the area over there was a little noisy and asked if they could spend time here instead. She quickly introduced herself. She bowed her head and explained that Hajime had brought her today because she impulsively asked to watch him play basketball. She also shared that Hajime had been helping her a lot. Misaki warmly greeted Minamino as Chinatsu-chan and suggested watching Minamino's boyfriend play together. The unexpected mention of a boyfriend left Minamino startled. Minamino quickly insisted that Hajime and Minamino did not have that kind of relationship. Embarrassment spread across Minamino's face, while Misaki gently encouraged her not to mind the teasing. Yuji cheerfully called Hajime his boy and praised him for finding a real beauty. Yuji looked at Hajime with satisfaction and expressed how great it was to see that Hajime was living a healthy life. Minamino quietly answered with a simple acknowledgement as she sat beside Hajime. Misaki remained nearby while the relaxed atmosphere continued around them. Minamino and Hajime sat together on the bench with a basketball resting nearby. The newcomer looked at the pair and remarked that this was an unusual pairing. Curiosity lingered in the air. A familiar voice suddenly called out to Minamino. The newcomer admitted surprise at finding Minamino and Hajime spending time together so casually. Hajime noticed the newcomer and realized that he was here today as well. Minamino turned toward the familiar figure and called out to Aizawa with surprise. A brief reaction escaped Aizawa as Minamino's voice reached him. Aizawa Shinji stood among the students as someone who occupied the top of the hierarchy alongside Minamino and Class D Satu. Despite his appearance, his grades remained top-notch, and his family carried considerable influence. The impression surrounding Aizawa formed a strange combination of a model student and a problem child. Kana was introduced as Aizawa's girlfriend. Upon noticing Hajime's arrival, Kana happily reacted to Hajimeki being here. Aizawa imagined the meltdown that would happen when everyone heard about this. Kana listened beside him, while the thought amused them both. Minamino quickly called out for Aizawa to wait and not continue. Hajime asked them to spare him the hazing. He reminded them that they had only just finished dealing with an uproar. Minamino wondered if they were really friends. Hajime had called him Shinji, and that familiar name left her quietly surprised. The joke had been cut short, so he let it go. Even so, he admitted that he had thought Minamino was just another superficial princess. After seeing her choose Hajime, he decided she must have some taste after all. He told Minamino that she was with him today and encouraged her to feel free to show off a bit. Hajime explained that Shinji was not actually a delinquent and only dressed like one. Shinji was a basketball buddy who understood Hajime's situation. Hajime faced him, has claimed that he would do everything in his power to upstage him. The familiar challenge carried the same competitive spirit that always existed between them. Aizawa laughed while holding the basketball and reminded everyone that Kana was watching too. The sight drew Minamino's full attention as the game approached. Aizawa teased Hajime and claimed he could complain after growing another inch or two. The difference between Aizawa's height and Hajime's height became the center of the joke. Hajime replied that nothing could be done about his height. Even so, Aizawa's words still hit a sore spot. Minamino watched the game with full attention. A small sound escaped her as she followed every move on the court. The surprised look on her face made bringing her there feel worth it. Misaki found Hajime impressive whenever he played basketball. Minamino quietly swallowed as those words stayed in her mind. Minamino had never thought of Hajime as the athletic type. Memories of Hajime casually fumbling a basketball made his current performance feel even more surprising. Hajime moved swiftly across the court. He reacted instantly and slipped past his opponent. She watched with shock as Hajime moved across the court. A quiet thought of what the sudden play had just been crossed her mind. The ball flew toward Hajime, and a call for Shinji echoed across the court. A voice praised the move as a nice play. The attack continued while the players rushed toward the basket. Aizawa drove toward the basket and sent the ball up toward the hoop. The play flowed smoothly as the game continued at a fast pace. Minamino watched the court and remarked that they were really good. The skill on display was impossible to miss. Misaki explained that Hajime had played for years, so his fundamentals were superb. Hajime was great at dribbling and always knew the right moment to pass. The more she learned about his ability, the more surprised she became. This was a side of Hajime that Minamino had never seen before. Aizawa laughed and teased them. Aizawa wondered if they was already getting soft and called him an old man. The playful challenge quickly filled the court. The opponent fired back and called Aizawa a punk. Yuji accused him of clowning around like a little kid. Another voice complained that they were only high schoolers, yet they kept bringing girls to show off in front of everyone. The complaint ended with open frustration toward both Hajime and Aizawa. Hajime wiped away his sweat and laughed along with them. The familiar teasing. Minamino stared in surprise. A quiet thought escaped her as she admired Hajime's smile. Seeing that expression felt completely new to her. Misaki watched Minamino and quickly noticed her fascination. With a soft laugh, Misaki remarked that Minamino seemed completely captivated. She admitted that Hajime was nothing like this at school. Curious about the difference, Misaki asked what Hajime was like at school. She explained that Hajime was not really noticeable at school. He was almost invisible among the students and rarely stood out. She revealed that Hajime and Aizawa were friends. Even so, they looked like complete strangers at school despite attending the same place. The person on the court felt completely different from the Hajime she knew. As Hajime held the ball and prepared for a three-point shot, Minamino admitted that she could barely recognize him. Hajime raised the ball toward the basket with confidence. She reflected that people might not speak badly about Hajime behind his back if he did not hide this side of himself. At that same moment, the ball dropped cleanly through the hoop. Misaki watched Hajime on the court and teasingly wondered if she was falling for him. Misaki reminded her that she had denied it earlier. Still, Misaki insisted that she could recognize a girl in love when she saw one. She quickly rejected the idea and insisted that it was not like that at all. She admitted that the feeling was closer to frustration. As they watched the game continue, she quietly reflected on the real Hajime. This side of Hajime felt incredible. She continued thinking about Hajime. He took care of his home by himself and worked hard at his job. Though he often appeared cold and distant, he was actually very kind. Hajime was also an amazing cook. Each new detail revealed another side of him that few people ever noticed. The people around Hajime gathered close and treated him with obvious affection. Aizawa and the others openly showed their respect for him. Minamino lowered her gaze and wondered why everyone praised her when she felt incapable of anything. The question weighed heavily on her heart. Minamino reflected that Hajime was always the one saving her. Since the day they met, she had done nothing but rely on him. The thought left her unable to ignore the difference. Memories surfaced of classmates mocking Hajime and calling him number 2. Even then, Hajime never argued back and never tried to defend himself. Hajime always brushed those words aside and accepted that people could say whatever they wanted. Kana dismissed the caste system at school as meaningless nonsense. To Kana, it was nothing more than a foolish way of dividing people. Minamino listened as Kana casually recognized her connection to Aizawa. Kana admitted that high school had been a terrible experience for her. She never fit in and eventually dropped out because that environment was not a place where she could belong. She explained that people could still find success in the real world, even under difficult conditions. Strange social hierarchies and unfair judgments did not determine a person's value. She reflected on Kana's words and realized that despite everything Kana had said, she had still been accepted into college. Kana noticed Minamino's surprise immediately and playfully pointed it out. When Minamino awkwardly apologized, Kana brushed it aside and assured her that everything was fine. Kana suddenly remembered the earlier conversation and asked what Minamino had been talking about before. The subject was indeed about Hajime being made fun of at school. Minamino hesitated for a moment beneath the brim of the cap before quietly confirming it. Minamino admitted that she and Hajime pretended they did not know each other at school. It made her really sad that she could not help him when people started talking. Kana explained that she only knew the Hajime who hung around Voltex and played ball. That was the side of him she had come to know. She believed Hajime was a good kid. She also thought he was a pretty cool one at that. She dismissed those people as nobodies whose words did not matter. Kana believed that ignorant people only made meaningless noise. She insisted that what those people said had no effect on relationships and no effect on life. Kana finished everything she wanted to say and turned her attention back to Minamino. Misaki acknowledged that things were not so simple. For a high school student, it was difficult to ignore the opinions of other people. She then added another thought. Not everyone needed the whole world to understand them. She believed that for some people having a single place where they belonged was enough. Sometimes all a person needed was one place that accepted them. Minamino quietly accepted her words and realized that Kana was completely right. The answer she had been searching for suddenly felt much clearer. She remembered how he had empathized with her experience without hesitation. He understood her feelings when no one else did. She recalled the many times Hajime had supported her. Through those small acts, he had made her feel as though her heart was soaring. Misaki asked Minamino how much she knew about Hajime's situation. The question was direct and focused on Hajime himself. Minamino admitted that she did not know much about Hajime's situation. She explained that Hajime lived alone and worked after school. She also knew that he played basketball. Other than that, she knew very little. Misaki decided that until Hajime chose to tell Minamino himself, she would not say anything more. Some parts of his story belonged to Hajime alone. Misaki gently asked Minamino to take good care of Hajime. The request carried a quiet trust that surprised Minamino. Minamino accepted those words and promised that she would. She still did not know what Hajime's situation truly was. Many things about him remained hidden from her. Minamino quietly accepted Misaki's words and realized they were right. A new understanding began to settle within her. All this time, Minamino's thoughts had been filled with frustration. She had convinced herself that things were unfair and impossible to change. But now Minamino looked at Hajime differently. As Hajime prepared his next move on the court, she felt those old thoughts beginning to fade. She could only think about how badly she wanted to know more about Hajime. She carried a feeling that might be called love. She honestly did not know if that was the truth. Kana remained in her thoughts. A relationship that collapsed like her parents' relationship filled her with fear. Hajime appeared before her with a bright smile. Sweat covered him from the game, yet that expression remained clear and warm. Minamino admitted that she still wanted to know more about Hajime. Even if people at school saw them high-fiving each other, they would probably talk about it all day. She suddenly realized that her thoughts sounded a lot like a girlfriend's. The idea embarrassed her. Nearby, Hajime noticed Minamino acting strangely and looked at her with confusion while she tried to hide her reaction. Late October arrived, and about 3 weeks had passed since Hajime took Shiro in. Shiro stared with a small cry while Hajime stepped out after a bath with a towel over his head. Shiro still looked hungry even after dinner, and Hajime wondered if more food was needed. As Hajime watched Shiro, he started thinking that it might be fine for Shiro to stay there forever. Shiro suddenly jumped onto Hajime, and the impact brought a quick sting. Hajime regretted forgetting that hugging him without a shirt could be painful. He looked toward Shiro and wondered if Shiro knew about the message. Yugi had found someone willing to adopt the cat. The person lived in Atami and had a way to get there. He held Shiro in both hands and wondered why Minamino only came there for Shiro. Lately, he could not help making enough food for two. The silent house felt too big for him alone. Minamino enjoyed the food and thought it tasted good. She spent her time playing with Shiro and caring for him. Hajime quietly watched her and noticed how happy she looked whenever Shiro was around. He realized that he was about to return to a life where no one would be there to welcome him home. Those thoughts weighed heavily on him and refused to leave his mind. He forced himself to stop thinking about it and pulled his shirt over his head. He decided that dwelling on those feelings would change nothing. Story continue. Hajime stretched his body before beginning the workout. A message reached Hajime during the run. Someone had finally agreed to adopt Shiro. The new owner lived in Mitaka. Hajime and Chinatsu could bring Shiro to them. Every step carried him across the town where he had spent his childhood. It was the place where he had lived until middle school. A gymnasium appeared in Hajime's memory. The basketball court was filled with students while a younger Hajime quietly sat among them. Hajime accepted that Mitaka was not a place worth longing for. It was simply a town that belonged to the past and never became a place that deserved another visit. He decides to go to Mitaka and walks through Toyota Station with a simple choice in mind. Hajime stands at the station holding a shopping bag and waits in quiet stillness as he looks forward without moving. Janatsu raises a hand in greeting with a bright morning tone and says they should have met at the platform, while also saying it is fine because she has a commuter pass ready. She looks at him and notices he looks sharp and good, and she gives praise while Hajime responds in a calm way saying she also looks good. Hajime looks toward Minamino in silence as his gaze lingers for a brief moment. Minamino meets that look and tilts her head slightly as curiosity shows in her expression, and she gently questions what Hajime is staring at. Hajime quickly turns his attention away and explains in a quiet manner that nothing is being stared at and that only the thought of her appearance being neat had crossed his mind. Minamino reacts with a light teasing tone as she notices his earlier gaze and mentions that he was about to say her clothes looked pretty. Minamino lets out a soft laugh while saying that seeing Hajime notice her like that makes her day feel brighter. She adds that such attention from him feels unexpectedly pleasant. Minamino reacts with a light teasing tone as she points out that Hajime always appears indifferent toward her, and in a thought that Minamino might not be interested in girls at all. Minamino mentions that she has been thinking for a while that if Hajime were a seasoning, he would be salt. Hajime responds that when her words are ignored, the response should not continue with more nonsense. Minamino lets out a light laugh and explains that most people never notice that salt is what makes everything taste good, and she finds that thought amusing while Hajime remains in quiet silence as he listens. Minamino continues with playful words, asking if Hajime's heart skipped a beat. Hajime tells Minamino that more than anything else he was thinking she was trying too hard again. Minamino laughs softly and tells him that he seriously understands her too well. Minamino holds Shiro gently and admits that she knows she was the one who asked him to look for an owner, but at some point she began to feel like they did not need to find one at all. She adds quietly that it felt like nothing needed to change. Hajime tells her that it was not just her who felt that way. She tells him that she sees, and that so he felt the same way too. Minamino flips through the box slowly with a soft rustling sound. The carrier shifts with a small thud, and Shiro peeks out from inside with wide, curious eyes. Soon, they arrive at a quiet residential building tucked along a narrow street. Minamino presses the doorbell to Unit 101, and the sound rings out clearly. They stand together at the entrance waiting for the door to open. A voice from inside calls out to come in. The door to Unit 101 of the Katawaki residence clicks open, and a warm voice from inside invites them to come in. Both of them announce their arrival together with a soft "excuse us" before stepping inside. Hajime steps into the entryway and crouches down to remove his shoes. Minamino stands just behind him waiting quietly as he finishes. Minamino crouches near the entrance and removes her boots neatly while setting the carrier beside her. Hajime introduces himself first and tells her that his name is Sada Hajime and that Hino Masaki-san was the one who referred them to her. Minamino follows right after and introduces herself as Minamino Chinatsu, saying it is nice to meet her. Minamino steps slightly closer, and the warm scent drifting from inside makes her smile as she lets out a soft wah and says something smells really good. The elderly woman responds warmly and remarks era how polite before introducing herself as Katawaki Kanade. She gestures toward a pot of beef stew she has prepared and invites them to sit and have a bite with her. Both Hajime and Minamino glance toward each other, as she adds with a gentle smile that they are such well-mannered children. Hajime tells her that they would be honored. Minamino quickly adds that she will help too. She tells Hajime that he is really good at showing respect. Kanade hums softly in the kitchen while Minamino and Hajime help prepare beside her. Minamino steals a glance at Hajime and smiles to herself. Then, the three of them sit down together at the table. Kanade asks them with a curious smile whether the two of them are a couple. The question catches Hajime completely off guard. Hajime coughs and manages to answer that no, they are just good friends. Minamino sits beside him looking perfectly unbothered. A guy like him could only ever be friends with a girl like her through sheer luck. Hajime thinks to himself that Minamino and him live in completely different worlds. He thinks, come on, being mistaken for her boyfriend is already more than he deserves. Kanade tells Hajime to not go saying things like a guy like me, and adds warmly that he is much more wonderful than he thinks he is. Hajime responds that with all due respect they literally just met. Kanade flicks her finger lightly and does not seem bothered at all. Minamino turns to Hajime with a bright smile and agrees that Kanade-san is so right. She tells him that Sato really is wonderful, especially when playing basketball. Hajime looks at her and tells her to quit messing with him, as Minamino laughs softly. Kanade sees them off at the door and thanks them so much for today. She adds warmly that they should come by and visit Shiro-chan again sometime. Minamino answers brightly that they will. Hajime tells Shiro quietly to see him later. Shiro lets out a tiny mew in response. Both Hajime and Minamino crouch down to say goodbye to Shiro. Minamino cries out a dramatic "Wa Shiro-chan" as she holds the small cat close one last time. They leave with a "please excuse us" and step out into the late afternoon. The sign for Mitaka Station comes into view as they make their way back. Hajime stands on the platform and starts to say today. Minamino turns toward him and asks HM. Minamino thinks to herself that Kanade-san was a good person and that she had a lot of fun. Hajime tells her yeah, and that it was not just today. Ever since he took Shiro, and he had been having the time of his life. Minamino says me too, and that she was really happy too. Then she pauses and starts to say, but you know Sato. Minamino reaches into her bag and holds out the apartment key toward him. She tells him that she thinks it is time she returned this. She adds that as thanks for everything he has done for her, she got him something too. Hajime looks down at the gift resting in his hand and asks what it is. Minamino tells him it is a sports towel and quietly adds that his key is in there too. Minamino keeps her gaze forward and admits that she was not sure what to get him, but thought something he could use for basketball would be a good choice. She then confesses that she does not really know what kind of present a boy would like, and that she had nobody she could ask. Her voice softens as she tells him that he probably does not even need it, but she asks him to please accept it anyway. Hajime softly calls her name. Minamino stands with the bag still in her hands, looking back at him. Hajime asks her quietly if she did that for him. Hajime takes the towel carefully in both hands, and after a brief silence tells her thank you. A familiar voice suddenly cuts through the moment, calling out "No way," and asking if that is really Sato. Kanasaki stands there with a relaxed smile, and his bag slung over his shoulder. Hajime tenses the moment he recognizes the face. He murmurs the name Kanasaki under his breath. Hajime thinks to himself that this is far from an awaited reunion, and that he never wanted to see this bastard again. Kanasaki steps closer and tells Hajime that Mane has been ages, and that he never thought he would run into him here. His eyes slide toward Minamino with a gleam, and he adds that he definitely did not expect it to be with a cutie like her either. Kanasaki leans in with a grin and asks if Minamino is Hajime's girl. Hajime thinks to himself that he has not changed at all. Kanasaki turns his attention toward Minamino with a smooth "why hello there." Hajime cuts in immediately and tells him to stop it. Kanasaki introduces himself to Minamino with an easy smile and tells her that he is Kanasaki and that he was Sada's friend from middle school. Minamino asks how the two of them know each other. Hajime thinks to himself enough, and that he is baffled beyond words that Kanasaki has the gall to speak to him after what happened. Minamino glances between them and hesitates. Every instinct inside Hajime tells him to run. The train doors slide shut behind them. Hajime tells Kanasaki plainly that Minamino is his friend from school, and that Kanasaki is interrupting because they were discussing something important. Hajime notices how clean and well-groomed he appears with that same smile plastered on his face. Hajime thinks to himself that Kanasaki always acts as if he is thinking of the other person. That is the kind of snake Kanasaki is. Hajime thinks of him as someone who always wore a friendly face while hiding something far uglier underneath. Kanasaki tells Hajime that he is so boring, but that he is happy for him. Then his expression shifts and his smile stretches wider as he says that Hajime's entire family is dead and buried. but the blood on his hands has not stopped him from scoring with the ladies. The words hit Hajime like a blow to the chest. His heart sank. Kanasaki keeps that same easy smile on his face and says, "Hey, did she know? And that back in middle school this guy killed his own sister and put her down like a dog." He adds lightly that, or so the rumors say. Those words drag Hajime down to the deepest depths of hell. Everything around him dissolves into darkness as the weight of what was just said crashes over him without mercy. Hajime thinks to himself that rumors Kanasaki said and asks who exactly started those rumors. He already knows the answer. Kanasaki was the only one he ever told about that. Hajime softly calls out Minamino's name. He wonders what kind of face she is making right now. He's too scared to look. Kanasaki tilts his head and wonders out loud if Hajime never said anything to Minamino. He lets out a soft "oh my" and says so he never trusted her and calls it how sad. Inside Hajime's chest the words "go fuck yourself" are screaming to come out, but his voice simply will not follow. Hajime stands there and thinks to himself that he is pathetic. Kanasaki turns his attention fully to Minamino and tells her she is super cute and asks how about she invites her friends and they all hang out sometime. She thinks that enough already as silence stretches on and the words he needs refuse to come. Minamino steps forward and her voice comes out sharp and clear. She tells Kanasaki how dare he wear that stupid grin on his face while laughing at the pain of someone precious to her. Kanasaki freezes. Hajime stands completely still as those words reach him. Someone precious to her. Kanasaki lets out a quiet damn and thinks to himself the loyal type, as a smirk crosses his face. Minamino turns her back to him completely and tells him not to ever speak to them again. Hajime stands there stunned as Minamino reaches down and grabs his hand firmly. Hajime feels the grip tighten around his fingers. Minamino looks up at him and tells him they are leaving as she pulls him away without looking back. Minamino pulls Hajime by the hand away from Toyota Station as their footsteps echo against the platform. She keeps walking and tells him that she is not going to apologize to him. Their hands are still connected as she leads him further away. Hajime lets out a quiet "huh." Minamino slows her pace and tells him that she has known all along that he was keeping secrets from her. Minamino tells him like why he lives alone in that house, or why he never talks about his family, or why he works after school, or why he tries so hard not to get involved with others. She admits she has wondered about it so much, but knew her place and stayed out of it. Minamino turns to face him, and her voice breaks slightly as she tells him that maybe what she said was out of line, and that maybe that guy really was his friend, and that she just cannot take a joke. Minamino tells him that she was completely shocked and overwhelmed, but when she saw that look on his face, something inside her just moved on its own. Their hands are still linked as they stand together under the open sky. Hajime looks at her quietly. Minamino looks away and tells him that anyone who makes someone she cares about feel like that is someone she cannot simply stand by and watch. Minamino raises her voice and declares with everything she has that someone like that absolutely is not his friend. The fire in her words fades just as quickly as it came. Tears spill down her face before she can stop them, and she presses her hand against her mouth, trying to hold it all back. Hajime watches her in silence. Hajime thinks to himself that it is futile. No matter what he does, the feeling rising inside him refuses to be stopped. Hajime pulls Minamino into his arms and holds her close. She lets out a startled sound against his chest. Hajime tells her sorry and calls her name softly. Minamino tells him she hates when he says that. Hajime murmurs a quiet then thanks. Minamino sniffles softly, and that they should go home. They walk side by side with their hands still held together. Minamino adds quietly to his place. Hajime answers yeah. He thinks to himself that he was a fool to ever believe he could stop himself from feeling this way. Hajime thinks to himself that it is high time he tells her his story. Back at his place they sit across from each other, with cups of tea resting between them. Hajime turns slightly toward her, and then stops. The words refuse to come. Hajime thinks that he who tears the masks from others while desperately hiding behind his own can only be called a coward. Minamino breaks the silence first. Her voice comes out soft and unhurried as she tells him that she was a daddy's girl when she was little. Hajime lets out a quiet ah as Minamino suddenly stands up from her seat. She moves toward the kitchen without a word and begins putting on an apron. Minamino talks while her hands stay busy. She tells him that her dad was kind and really cool, and that he spoiled her a lot. She adds that her mom was strict but gentle too, and that all in all she considered herself blessed with a nice family. The mood shifts. Minamino pauses and tells him quietly that but this winter the divorce will be finalized. Hajime listens without a word. Minamino continues without looking up. Her dad was caught having an affair with his subordinate. They even had a child together. She says it is disgusting, and that just the thought of it sickens her. Hajime listens quietly as Minamino says, even so. Her voice drops lower as she admits that she still likes her dad. Minamino stands alone in the hallway of her memory. She tells him that her dad betrayed her mom and abandoned them, and that she lives with the damage he did each and every day. Then she adds quietly that somehow the love she had for him has never faded. Her mom pulls her close and tells her to forget about that jerk, and that he does not even deserve her hatred. She apologizes to Chinatsu and tells her that they still have each other. Minamino knocks softly on her mom's door and asks if she works early tomorrow. She tells her mom not to worry because she will make her a bento. Her mom answers with a warm "oh" and says goodnight. Minamino sits alone and gently pats her own cheek as the memory quietly fades. Minamino told him that it was not just at school. She had a role to play at home too. Her voice carried something quiet and tired beneath the surface. That day Hajime and Minamino stood together as she began to speak what had been weighing on her heart for so long. Minamino admitted that she had not wanted to be home or at school. The little cat's soft cries filled the silence around her words. Then she lifted her gaze toward Hajime and told him that when he took Shiro and she had clung to him just the same, as if she herself had been astray too. Minamino looked down and confessed that she had used his home as a place to escape. She had not wanted to go back to her own. Minamino held the key gently in her palm and admitted that, to be honest, she had not really wanted to return it. Hajime stood quietly beside her as Minamino told him that she could not take off her mask anywhere. Her voice was steady, but something underneath it felt fragile. She continued and said that except in front of him, she had nowhere to let it down. She closed her eyes slowly and finished with a quiet certainty. That was her, Minamino Chinatsu. Minamino sat still with a softness in her expression and said that this was her everything. This was who she truly was. Her words carried no performance and no pretending. Hajime began to ask why she was telling him. Before the words could finish, Minamino raised her hand gently and stopped him. Minamino told him she was not finished yet. She apologized for dumping all of that on him, but said she had wanted him to know about her. Her voice was soft and unhurried, as if every word had been waiting a long time to be said. Hajime stood there quietly as her last words reached him. She wanted to know about him too. Hajime said nothing. He only looked forward as the weight of her words settled over him slowly and completely. Even after all of that, Hajime was still hesitant, that he was afraid of what Minamino would think of him once she heard what he had done. Hajime told her quietly that it was not a fun story. Minamino smiled softly and told him that hers was not either. Then she leaned closer and told him she wanted to hear it. She said he could take his time. Hajime looked ahead as a single word surfaced from somewhere deep inside him. Miho called out. She told him it was their dad's last day of vacation, so they should just skip the closing ceremony. Hajime asked her why she would even want to do that, and told her it was not that simple. The small note beside her read that they were in the same middle school. Miho turned to him with a wide grin and asked if he was going to drive them to the beach. Their dad laughed and said he had only taken paid time off so they could move. Hajime watched his little sister with a quiet and helpless expression. He murmured to himself that Miho was truly so carefree. Hajime pointed out that Miho still had not finished unpacking. Miho sat across from him and asked if Oniai was not taking things too seriously. Her name was written beside her in simple characters. Hajime startled at her outburst while a small note beside him read that he was always serious. Miho let out a dramatic sound and said fine. She told him she would finish unpacking, but she was not going to the closing ceremony because that was less beach time. Miho suddenly cried out in pain. Boxes tumbled and chaos broke out around her. Hajime sighed at the noise and told her to hang on while he went to get her a bandage. Miho stomped her feet and wailed that it hurt so much. She cried out for their mom and complained that it was going to sting in the water and that she would not be able to swim. The first aid box sat quietly on the shelf nearby. Miho kept squirming and let out another dramatic wail. Hajime held her hand firmly and told her to hold still. The note beside her finger pointed out that it was only a tiny cut. Hajime told her calmly that she could see it was no big deal. Miho let out a shriek and declared that it was a huge deal. She pressed her hand to her face and cried that this was the worst and that she absolutely hated painful things. Hajime called out to his dad and mom. A quiet yeesh escaped him as he began to speak. He told them he did not really care about the closing ceremony, but he wanted to drop by the club when it was over. He would take the train and catch up later. His mom asked if he would be okay on his own. Hajime told her he would be fine and muttered quietly that he was not a kid. His dad handed over the train fare and told him all right. Hajime thanked him and took it. Miho rested her chin in her hands with a grin and teased that club and called him a total basketball addict. She added with a laugh that it must be because it was the only thing he was good at. Hajime told Miho flatly that saying only had not been necessary. Miho waved at him with a wide grin and called out "see you later" to him. Their mom laughed softly beside her. Outside, Miho ran toward the car and announced cheerfully that she would sit in the back. She called out that they would all be waiting for him at the beach. Hajime watched them go with a small and quiet smile, then added softly that he would see them there. Hajime looked at the teacher with confusion. A quiet question crossed his mind as he wondered what had happened. The teacher asked Hajime to stay calm and listen carefully. Heavy words followed as the teacher revealed that Hajime's family had been involved in an accident. Hajime stood in silence as the news reached him. The shocking words felt impossible to believe, and Hajime could only wonder what the teacher meant. The teacher urged Hajime to come to the car because they were going to the hospital together. Another question quickly followed as the teacher asked whether Hajime had any relatives they could contact. The teacher tried to reassure Hajime that everything would be fine. Another gentle voice encouraged Hajime to stay calm and believe that everything would be all right. Hajime could no longer understand the words around him. The only thought that remained was the accident that had suddenly shattered everything. Hajime searched for familiar faces inside his heart. Thoughts of his father and his mother slowly appeared. Then Miho's name quietly followed as fear continued to grow. Hajime lowered his head as another painful truth settled inside him. There was no relative that Hajime could contact. Hajime quietly admitted that both parents had already passed away. That truth left him with no connection to his mother's relatives because Hajime did not know any of them. Hajime remembered having an uncle. He had always lived overseas, and there was no way to reach him. The contact list offered no hope. Hajime realized his uncle was not listed there, and there was no way to know whether they could even get in touch with him. The car continued toward the hospital. Hajime remained silent while the teacher and the woman stayed beside him throughout the journey. The hospital finally came into view as the car arrived at its destination. The teacher stayed beside Hajime after reaching the hospital. They followed him all the way inside because they did not want him to face everything alone. A hospital staff member quietly guided Hajime forward. The teachers remained behind while Hajime walked toward the room where the victims had been brought. Hajime looked ahead without a word. His heart slowly grew heavier as every step carried him closer to the painful truth. A hand appeared beneath the sheet. Hajime immediately recognized it. There was no mistake. Those were his parents. Hajime quietly spoke Miho's name. One request filled his heart as Hajime asked to be taken to his little sister. Hajime stood outside the room without moving. His gaze never left Miho as fear slowly filled his heart. The hospital room came into view. Miho lay on the bed surrounded by medical equipment, while every machine continued working to keep her alive. Miho's arm rested beneath the blanket. A heavy splint covered her injured limb and revealed how serious her condition had become. Miho's weak voice trembled as a faint sound escaped her lips. Every painful breath showed that she was still fighting to stay alive. The doctor looked at Hajime with deep regret. Miho's injuries were far too severe. Recovery was no longer possible. The only thing left was to prepare Hajime for what the family would soon face. Hajime refused to accept those words. Even if he covered his ears and tried to run away, the painful truth continued to follow him. Hajime desperately wished the doctor would stop because he could not bear to hear another word. The doctor explained that Miho was alive only because of the ventilator. Even so, her heart would likely stop within a few days. The doctor gently explained that the machine could be turned off now, or Miho could be allowed to pass away naturally. The doctor quietly told Hajime that the decision belonged to him because of the circumstances they were facing. Hajime lowered his head and remained silent. He could not even find time to understand what had happened. In a single instant, his entire world changed forever. Hajime quietly called Miho's name. A painful request followed as Hajime asked whether he could hold his little sister's hand. He gently reached for Miho's hand. That single moment felt endless as time seemed to stop around them. He lowered his head while remembering that only this morning Miho had been full of life. Now she was suffering through unbearable pain. The clock quietly marked the moment. It was July 20th, 2021 at 4:18 p.m. Hajime quietly remembered that this was the moment when those words left his lips. That decision remained carved into his heart and never faded. He, with a faint smile that could no longer hide his pain, he begged for only one thing and wished for someone to end Miho's suffering. Minamino remained silent as Hajime's confession reached her. The painful truth behind Hajime's past slowly settled into her heart. Minamino looked at Hajime with sadness. Hajime's past was too cruel, and no one should ever have to live through such suffering. Those thoughts quietly filled Minamino's heart. She quietly watched Hajime without looking away. No matter how painful the truth became, Minamino had already decided to stay and listen until the very end. Hajime gently reached for the cup. A quiet thought remained inside him as Hajime admitted that the story still did not feel real. It felt as though everything had happened to someone else, and Hajime had only heard it by chance. Hajime gave a small nod and admitted that his uncle was the only reason he was still here. Minamino quietly asked whether Hajime's uncle had been there for him. The memory returned without warning. Uncle Kakeru rushed into the room in complete panic. He hurried toward Hajime and apologized for arriving late. Sorrow filled his voice as he realized Hajime had been left alone through everything. Uncle Kakeru held the phone with trembling hands. Miho's name and Kanedade's name escaped his lips as tears continued to fall. The phone had belonged to Hajime's father, and every word revealed his grief. Uncle Kakeru rushed into the room in complete hysterics. Uncle Kakeru gently praised Hajime for enduring everything alone until now. Uncle Kakeru promised that they would face everything together from this day forward. Hajime no longer had to worry about where he would live, because the house belonged to him. The support from life insurance had brought both tragedy and a way to keep living. Uncle Kakeru also promised to look after Hajime until he became an adult. Hajime looked down at the insurance papers in silence. Thoughts of his father and mother and Miho filled his heart. Hajime could not accept the money because it felt as though their lives had been exchanged for it. Uncle Kakeru gently refused that painful thought. Hajime could not think about it that way. He paused for a moment as he searched for the right words. He gave Hajime a warm smile. Hajime quietly accepted those words. Uncle Kakeru encouraged Hajime to take everything one step at a time. Uncle Kakeru smiled brightly and invited Hajime to eat first. He asked about Hajime's favorite meat. Hajime quietly answered that chicken was his favorite. Uncle Kakeru happily decided to make carriage for Hajime. The cheerful promise brought a small warmth into the house. Life slowly moved forward with endless responsibilities. Laundry, cleaning, taxes, and many other daily tasks quietly became part of Hajime's new life. He encouraged Hajime to start working as well. Hajime had a healthy body, and Kakeru believed he should make good use of it. Kakeru also introduced Hajime to people who could help him find work. Hajime quietly admitted that Uncle Kakeru had spent the next half year teaching him how to survive. Gratitude filled Hajime's heart because everything he had learned came from his uncle. After Hajime entered high school, Uncle Kakeru returned to his own job as a performer. Even so, they continued to stay in touch. Hajime quietly admitted that without Uncle Kakeru, he would have fallen into despair and ruined his own life. Hajime believed that without his uncle there was no doubt his future would have been lost. Hajime lowered his gaze with a faint smile. The memories were painful, yet they also reminded him of the person who had saved his life. Minamino quietly looked at Hajime. She listened without interrupting as she slowly understood. Hajime quietly admitted that the next part of his story had never been told to anyone. Even Uncle Kakuro had never heard it. Hajime asked whether Minamino would become the first person to listen to everything. Minamino looked at Hajime with a gentle smile. She accepted without hesitation and promised that she would listen. A faint smile appeared on Hajime's face. The decision to reveal the final truth had already been made. Hajime slowly lowered his gaze. One name returned to his mind: Kanasaki. He believed the biggest mistake of his life had been getting involved with Kanasaki. It was the end of summer break. Hajime quietly walked along the street when someone suddenly called out to him. The familiar voice called him. Hajime turned toward the voice. The face before him belonged to Kanasaki. Kanasaki greeted Hajime with a bright smile. It had been a long time since they had last met, and Hajime quietly agreed that it really had. He gently reminded Hajime that no one blamed him because Hajime had already been through so much. Kanasaki also asked whether Hajime had been doing all right. Kanasaki assured Hajime that everyone had been worried about him. He also told Hajime not to worry about the club because everything there was fine. He gently offered to listen if Hajime wanted to talk about anything. Hajime quietly repeated the word talk. The unexpected offer left Hajime uncertain, as he wondered what Kanasaki truly meant. Kanasaki invited Hajime to have a meal together instead of standing outside. He promised to treat Hajime and hoped they could talk while they ate. Hajime quietly admitted that he could not bring himself to tell Uncle Kakuro the truth. Hajime could never confess that he had been the one who chose to remove Miho's life support. Hajime lowered his gaze in silence. That was everything that had happened to Miho. Kanasaki appeared thoughtful and supportive. Hajime believed Kanasaki was someone safe to trust, and someone who could keep that painful secret. Hajime apologized because the story had become so heavy. Kanasaki gently accepted Hajime's apology. Kanasaki admitted that it was all right because he could only imagine how painful everything had been for Hajime. It was the closing ceremony after summer break. Hajime arrived at school only to hear his own name spreading through whispered rumors. Students questioned whether Sada Hajime had really killed his own sister. Hajime stood frozen as the whispers grew louder. Some students claimed that Miho had been killed by her older brother, while others quickly warned them to stay quiet because Hajime could hear every word. Minamino looked at Hajime in disbelief. The cruel rumor made no sense and Minamino could only wonder what had happened. Hajime quietly revealed that Kanasaki was the only person who knew the truth. Minamino asked why Kanasaki would do such a thing and why it had happened. Hajime wondered the same thing, so Hajime confronted Kanasaki. He revealed that worry had led him to ask several people for advice. He answered with a quiet smile and admitted that word had spread and the story had become twisted. He then declared that Hajime could not return to the basketball club after something like that had happened. He called Hajime by name and smiled as if nothing had changed. He declared that there was no need to worry because he would do his best at the finals in Hajime's place. Kanasaki laughed without concern while Hajime stood in silence and watched every gesture with growing disbelief. Hajime drifted through the hallway without direction while the truth slowly settled within him that this was the kind of person Kanasaki truly was. Hajime finally understood how Val Kanasaki truly was. He watched as classmates and club members treated Kanasaki with warmth because they believed Kanasaki was considerate. No one wanted to go against the story that had spread, and no one chose to stand beside him. Hajime collapsed onto the bed and buried his face in the pillow as every burden finally weighed upon him. He was not consumed by anger. Hajime was simply tired after everything that had happened. Minamino listened in silence as Hajime revealed that basketball had always held a special place in his heart. Hajime remembered that basketball had never been just a game. He remembered how his father and Uncle Kakuro used to play with him, and those memories became something precious that remained in his heart. Hajime recalled the joyful days when his father and Uncle Kakeru played basketball with him. Every shared game and every touch of the ball became a treasured memory that stayed with Hajime. He wondered if Kanasaki truly resented him, that deeply simply, because Hajime had always been better than him. Thanks to Uncle Kakeru and the friends who stayed beside him, Hajime managed to move forward and enter high school. Hajime explained that everyone called him Number 2 because he belonged to Class D as Satakuen. Hajime accepted that name as a blessing because it was far better than being called a murderer. Hajime let out a faint laugh and admitted that the story had become longer than expected, but that was everything he wanted to share. Hajime noticed Minamino suddenly rise from her seat and turned toward her with surprise as Hajime quietly called Minamino's name and wondered what had happened. Minamino stared at Hajime in silence before emotion finally overflowed. Minamino called Hajime an idiot and repeated that Hajime was an idiot with trembling conviction. Minamino embraced Hajime with all her strength and called Hajime an unbelievable idiot. Minamino could not understand why Hajime kept smiling while remembering something so painful. Minamino held Hajime close and declared that everyone had treated Hajime so terribly. Minamino could not accept that anyone could claim Hajime had killed his sister because Hajime had saved Miho from her suffering. Minamino cried harder while holding Hajime close. Minamino burned with anger toward the people who had shaped Hajime into someone who smiled even after suffering more than anyone. Minamino also turned that anger toward herself because Minamino had never noticed anything at all. Hajime gently told Minamino that nothing was worth crying over and tried to ease Minamino through quiet words. She wept without holding anything back because she believed tears had to fall for Hajime, who had carried such thoughts alone. Hajime quietly accepted Minamino's feelings and thanked Minamino for caring about someone like Hajime. She immediately refused those words and pushed Hajime with frustration because Hajime should never speak about himself that way. She could only stare in disbelief for a brief moment before pleading for Hajime to stop saying such painful things. She looked at Hajime and declared that the Hajime standing before Minamino was kind and independent. She believed Hajime smiled like a child whenever Hajime played basketball, and those memories defined the real him. She held on to that belief without hesitation. No matter what anyone claimed, Minamino knew that Hajime stood above every false accusation, that Hajime was second to no one, and no lie could ever change that truth. A sudden movement closed the distance between them as Minamino pulled Hajime closer and pressed a kiss against Hajime. Hajime could only call Minamino's name before every thought disappeared beneath the unexpected warmth. Hajime remained frozen in complete surprise as the kiss ended. Minamino closed her eyes and poured every feeling into that quiet touch, while Hajime stayed completely still beneath the unexpected warmth. The distance between their lips slowly faded, and the lingering warmth remained between Hajime and Minamino. Minamino finally gathered enough breath to continue, and could only think that what had just happened was the beginning of something that could no longer be taken back. She admitted that the kiss had been Minamino's first. She wanted Hajime to understand, because Hajime was wonderful. Hajime was the first boy Minamino had ever wanted to kiss. Hajime stared at Minamino in silence while she kept holding onto Hajime's shirt. Hajime heard every word from her, but could not understand what Minamino truly meant. Hajime knew that he and Minamino had just shared a kiss. He believed Minamino called Hajime wonderful and searched for something to say. Hajime quietly called Minamino because silence could not last forever. She hesitated for a moment before apologizing. She admitted that listening had been the only plan, but everything became overwhelming. She decided to go home before any more words could come out. Hajime watched Minamino as soft footsteps echoed away. Minamino turned back with a flustered face, then gathered the courage to ask Hajime to come again. Next day, Minamino lay on the bed in her room on Sunday while hugging a pillow. Heavy breaths escaped without stopping as the memory refused to fade. She remembered yesterday and realized that the kiss with Hajime had truly happened. Then she remembered running away instead, and embarrassment rushed back all over again. She remembered the time with Kanade and recalled how Hajime was praised as a modest young man. She happily agreed that Hajime was truly calm and polite. Hajime could cook and was also really good at basketball. She grabbed her head in embarrassment because the memory made her feel like a girl proudly talking about her boyfriend. She wondered if anyone else would react like this, and hoped Hajime had not been put off by it. She could not stop thinking about Hajime. The memory of Hajime smiling so happily after receiving the gift stayed in Minamino's heart. She suddenly remembered that person who ruined everything. The thought made her let out a frustrated cry. She realized that without that person, Hajime would never have shared his story. She smiled after realizing that without that person, Minamino would still be waiting for a chance to kiss Hajime. Minamino suddenly realized that Minamino had already decided to kiss Hajime someday. The thought slipped out loud, and Minamino quickly thanked fate because her mother was still at work. Minamino looked around the quiet room as another thought slowly came to mind. Minamino remembered that Hajime had spent all this time alone in that house. Hajime had even seen that lonely place as a cozy hideaway. She wanted to visit Hajime again because that place had become precious to her. She finally understood how important Hajime had become. She hugged her knees and admitted that kissing Hajime had truly made her happy. The thought made she hide her face in embarrassment. She quietly wondered what would happen next. She wondered if becoming a couple with Hajime would mean they could finally start dating. She imagined going on dates with Hajime without hiding anything. She soon realized that reality would be different. The memory of people reacting with confusion and asking why made that fear feel real. She knew they would only be harassed if they tried. She hugged her knees tightly while searching for an answer. The silence in the room gave Minamino time to think. She looked around the room until a sudden thought appeared. She finally found the answer. She quietly realized that was it. Monday arrived after school, and 2 days had passed since the kiss. Hajime heard classmates invite everyone to karaoke and ask when club activities would start. He only watched in silence while Minamino stayed nearby with a phone in her hands. He admitted that his behavior felt pathetic. He realized that he had not reached out to Minamino even once. Yesterday, he searched about kissing on his phone. He looked for the meaning of a kiss and whether every kiss was romantic. He also searched how to talk after kissing and how to kiss with the mouth. He felt that everything was so stupid and believed this had become a new low. He even thought getting caught searching adult content would have been less embarrassing than searching all of this. He stared at the search results in silence. He received a message asking whether he wanted to go get crepes together. He accepted the invitation right away. He put away his phone after sending an instant reply. He admitted that making the first move felt impossible. Hajime could only reply immediately like a loyal dog and felt frustrated with himself. He noticed Minamino and quietly watched her from a distance. Minamino quietly waited while holding her bag. He received a message asking him to change into casual clothes and meet in front of the convenience store past the ticket gate at Nishihachi. He waited in front of the convenience store and realized this could no longer be called just hanging out. He accepted that this was a date. Hajime noticed that Minamino had not arrived yet. He caught a familiar scent and wondered if it was Minamino, even though Minamino was still nowhere to be seen. He wondered if Minamino had really arrived. Hajime looked around and realized Minamino was not there. He suddenly noticed Minamino's scent and questioned why a crepe smelled like Minamino. He quickly stopped himself and waited. He recognized Minamino's scent, and nothing else could stay in his mind. He realized that no thought remained except Minamino. He tried to think about Kanasaki and even questioned who Kanasaki was. He slowly calmed himself and looked at both of his hands. He turned around after hearing Minamino call his name. Minamino, wearing glasses, let out a soft laugh. She, wearing glasses, smiled at Hajime and praised Hajime for finding her. Hajime could only stand there in surprise. Hajime looked at Minamino, wearing glasses, in disbelief and wondered if Minamino was really serious. She proudly revealed that her genius disguise had been created through careful experimentation. She called it an inconspicuous disguise and looked completely satisfied. Hajime admitted that Minamino had fooled almost everyone. Hajime accepted that recognizing Minamino by her scent alone deserved to be buried with the grave. Hajime admitted that he had seen through Minamino's disguise right away. She let out a cheerful laugh and reached out her hand. She invited Hajime to go eat some crabs together. Minamino held Hajime's hand once again. He realized that Minamino remained calm and playful just as always. Her gentle attitude never changed despite everything that had happened. He looked at she in silence and wondered if her expression remained completely unreadable. Hajime questioned whether only he felt painfully self-conscious, while she acted as naturally as ever. She softly called out to Hajime and wanted to know how he had recognized her despite the disguise. Minamino happily admitted that she had been certain her disguise would fool him. Her curiosity quickly grew, and she wanted to know how he had recognized her despite everything. Minamino eagerly urged him to reveal the answer. He could only fall silent, while the memory of identifying her by her scent deserved nothing less than being buried forever. Hajime reluctantly admitted that he had recognized her by her scent. He already understood how unsettling that sounded, and could only brace himself for her reaction. Minamino suddenly burst into laughter and could not hold it back. Her cheerful reaction left him completely speechless, while everyone nearby simply watched the unexpected scene. She realized that he had never actually recognized her. She understood that he had only called her name because he believed he had caught her scent instead. Hajime fell silent because there was nothing he could say to deny her conclusion. Minamino playfully concluded that changing both her appearance and her perfume would finally let her fool him completely. Minamino suddenly remembered something and asked whether he knew an interesting fact. Her playful smile made it clear that she was eager to share it with him. Minamino revealed that people who found each other's scent appealing were supposedly genetically compatible. She offered the fact with complete confidence and watched for his reaction. Hajime froze the instant those words reached him. Her unexpected explanation struck him far harder than he ever expected. Minamino suddenly stepped closer and placed her hand on his shoulder. She rose onto her toes with a small hop and quietly leaned toward him as if she wanted to confirm something for herself. Minamino gently rested her face against his shoulder and breathed in his scent without the slightest hesitation. Minamino quietly breathed in his scent and carefully searched for any trace of a fragrance. She found nothing at all and could only fall into thoughtful silence. Minamino admitted that she could not smell anything. She wondered what it meant when someone had no scent at all and looked at him with genuine curiosity. Hajime jokingly wondered if they had already been dating without realizing it. The absurd thought slipped through his mind before he could stop it. Minamino began wondering if he was simply unscented or completely odorless. The strange result left her more puzzled than before. She suddenly asked whether he had ever been in a relationship before. Her unexpected question caught him completely off guard. Hajime immediately denied it and insisted that nothing like that had ever happened. He even wondered if she had somehow started reading his mind. Hajime admitted that Minamino had experienced relationships before. He quietly added that they had all been shallow despite their existence. She softly hummed to herself and calmly considered his answer. A thoughtful smile slowly appeared as another idea began forming in her mind. Minamino admitted that the kiss had been her first kiss. The memory lingered in her heart and left her unable to hide her embarrassment. Hajime stood speechless as her confession settled into his thoughts. His mind drifted away while he quietly tried to process those unexpected words. Minamino happily announced that they had finally arrived. She eagerly urged him to come this way and guided him toward the crepe shop with bright excitement. Minamino happily told him that the crepes were not only unbelievably delicious, but also surprisingly cheap. She eagerly suggested that they look at the menu together and choose something to eat. Hajime quietly sank into self-loathing and shame. Those feelings continued to weigh on his heart while he followed beside her. Minamino smiled as the sweet aroma drifted through the shop. She happily remarked that everything smelled so delicious while leading him inside. Hajime quietly looked over the menu, while she asked whether salty or sweet crepes would be better. She believed either choice would be perfect and waited for his opinion. He simply gave the menu a thoughtful look. Minamino asked how he felt about whipped cream. Hajime admitted that he could take it or leave it, but felt the amount shown on the menu looked excessive. He silently apologized to the cashier in his thoughts for such an opinion. Minamino readily accepted his choice and told him to order something salty. She decided to get a strawberry whipped cream crepe and happily suggested that they could share their food together. Hajime quietly agreed that her idea sounded like a good plan. She happily told him to wait for a moment while they finished placing the order. Hajime accepted the freshly made crepes after the staff thanked them for waiting. He wondered how two people were supposed to share a single crepe until he noticed another couple naturally feeding each other. He immediately understood the idea and quietly admitted that everything made sense. The crabs looked delicious, and both of them admired the tempting dessert. Hajime noticed the couple nearby sharing a crepe together. He knew she had seen the same scene and understood exactly what her suggestion meant. He could not understand why she remained completely unfazed by the idea. Hajime wondered whether he had been overthinking everything and making a big deal out of nothing. He quickly convinced himself that his feelings were completely justified because someone with no dating experience could never stay calm in a situation like this. Minamino suddenly called out to him with a bright smile. She suggested that they take the crepes to her house and eat them there instead. Hajime froze when he realized she had invited him to her house. The thought alone left him completely shaken. Minamino happily told him that her home was only a 3-minute walk away. She cheerfully urged him to come along and started leading the way with her crepe in hand. Minamino cheerfully called for him to follow this way. Hajime felt like a leaf drifting in a strong current because everything continued moving before he could gather his thoughts. Hajime quietly followed behind her. The memory of her words about people who found each other's scent appealing being genetically compatible returned to his mind and refused to leave. She promised to bring him some coffee before stepping away. Minamino welcomed him into her room and apologized for making him wait. She laughed loudly when she noticed how stiff he looked and compared him to a scolded puppy. Hajime begged to be left alone because it was his first time inside a girl's room. He admitted that he was not used to a situation like this at all. Hajime quietly wondered how many more times she planned to laugh at him that day. Minamino placed a cup of black coffee before Hajime because she remembered that black coffee was the way he liked it. He accepted it with a quiet thanks. Minamino watched his reaction with bright anticipation. Hajime admitted that it was not bad at all, and even let out a surprised reaction. She happily declared that the batter had to be under some kind of spell because it tasted that good. Minamino held out her crepe toward him with a cheerful smile and invited him to try some of hers because it was filled with strawberry whipped cream. Hajime admitted that he had expected the whipped cream to be overwhelming, but it had actually turned out delicious. Minamino accepted that she had been right because he truly liked it. Minamino happily asked for some of his crepe as well. She encouraged him to hand it over without hesitation and waited expectantly. Hajime offered his crepe to her without resistance. He quietly let her take a taste from it. Minamino enjoyed the bite with obvious satisfaction. She admitted that nothing could beat the combination of salty and sweet. Hajime suddenly let out a quiet sound as another thought crossed his mind. Hajime remembered the couple who had shared a crepe together. He realized that the delicious taste had distracted him until now, but sharing food like this was exactly the same thing they had been doing. Minamino looked at him with quiet curiosity after noticing his reaction. Minamino softly called Hajime's name after noticing his silence. She waited for his attention with quiet anticipation. Minamino stayed seated before him with both hands resting together. She continued watching him in silence while waiting for his response. He could only remain silent while trying to gather his composure. Hajime faced Minamino in complete silence. He tried to speak and could only force out a hesitant beginning before falling silent once again. A sudden crash echoed through the room before either of them could continue. The sharp noise abruptly shattered the quiet atmosphere that had settled between them. Minamino suddenly wondered if her mother had come home. She realized it was far earlier than usual and quickly called out to her. Hajime looked toward the noise and wondered if something had fallen over. He also realized that it was finally time to introduce himself. Minamino rushed over and found her mother collapsed on the floor. She immediately called out to her again with growing alarm. Hajime hurried to her side while Minamino desperately asked what was wrong and whether she was all right. He quickly realized that her body was burning with fever. Minamino gently supported her mother and anxiously asked whether she was all right. Her mother weakly apologized to Chinatsu and explained that she had tried to leave work early but had collapsed before making it home. Minamino immediately rejected the apology and asked what there was to apologize for. Her only concern was her mother's condition. Minamino desperately called out to her mother again and begged her to wait, while fear filled every word. Hajime quietly watched the situation unfold, while staying ready to help if needed. Hajime quickly told Minamino that he would call a taxi. He asked her to let her mother rest, while help was on the way. Hajime calmly asked which hospital was the closest. She answered that the central hospital near the highway was the nearest destination. Hajime immediately asked whether her mother had any pre-existing medical conditions or took any medication. She believed that there were none. Hajime looked over the situation and concluded that her mother had probably been working far too much lately. He also believed that she had not been eating properly. Hajime confirmed that the taxi would arrive in 7 minutes after checking the reservation on his phone. Minamino found Hajime's words reassuring, because the best way to reassure her during a time like this was for Hajime to take charge. Hajime asked Minamino to look for her mother's health insurance card while he stayed nearby. Hajime contacted the central hospital reception and informed them that an emergency patient was on the way, while pointing out that Minamino had also prepared the medication and clinical records. Minamino quickly found her mother's insurance card and also gathered her medication and clinical records before bringing everything to Hajime. Minamino thanked Hajime with sincere gratitude. Hajime offered a gentle smile while Minamino's mother softly called Chinatsu by name and apologized. Minamino's mother turned her gaze toward Hajime and included him in her apology with quiet gratitude. Hajime answered with a small smile and assured her there was no need to mention it. Then, a hospital staff member waited beside the arriving taxi while the admission process began. The insurance card was handed over and the registration procedure moved forward without delay. Hajime supported Minamino's mother, while a nurse guided her into a wheelchair and escorted her through the emergency entrance. Minamino quietly asked whether her mother was being hospitalized. The doctor confirmed that her mother had pneumonia and was also suffering from malnutrition. Minamino told Hajime that she would help her mother get changed first. Minamino softly called Hajime's name, as another thought remained unspoken. Hajime answered with a gentle smile and decided that waiting outside would be enough. He remembered that hospitals were still difficult places for him and quietly admitted that truth to himself. A familiar memory returned as gentle words reached Hajime. He had endured everything alone until now, and from this point forward they would face everything together. He remembered hearing those encouraging words through a phone call and holding on to them deep within his heart. He remembered spending ordinary days together while folding laundry and sharing quiet moments. He remembered studying side by side and smiling together. A warm smile carried the promise that every kindness received from Hajime would be repaid in its place, because the kindness once given by Aniki could never be repaid. An uncle patiently taught Hajime many things. Hajime learned about ETF's money management, video editing, and many other skills that would support his future. The guidance continued as Hajime learned how to survive without parental support and guidance. The uncle reached out to the child who had seemed destined to slip through the cracks and encouraged Hajime to believe that he could do it. He lifted his gaze when Minamino quietly called Sada, then she asked whether Hajime was okay. He answered that everything was fine, then confirmed that he was in top form. She asked about her mother and hoped to know how she was doing. She revealed that her mother was stable and wanted to speak with him. Hajime listened as Minamino admitted that now that her mother was fully conscious, she believed the truth had finally reached her. She believed her mother had finally realized that a boy had stayed in their house. She quietly that her mother probably had some opinions about that. Minamino lowered her gaze as uncertainty filled her heart. Minamino admitted that she did not know what her mother was going to say, but wanted to apologize in advance. Hajime answered with a faint smile that there were no worries. Hajime stepped forward with steady resolve as the memory of his uncle returned. His uncle encouraged Hajime that he could do it and strengthened Hajime's determination to face whatever waited ahead. Minamino's mother noticed someone at the door as Hajime politely asked for pardon before stepping into the hospital room. Minamino stood beside Hajime and introduced him as her classmate Hajime. Hajime lowered his head with respect as Minamino quietly introduced herself as Minamino Ryoka. Minamino's mother accepted the introduction. Minamino's mother apologized for the condition she was in as she welcomed both of them into the room. Minamino's mother expressed her gratitude for Hajime's help. Hajime remembered his uncle's advice that honesty and sincerity were important when dealing with adults, and that lies and deception should never be used. Hajime followed those words and apologized for entering her house without permission. Minamino's mother admitted that despite what anyone might suspect, Hajime and Minamino were only friends. Minamino's mother reacted with quiet surprise as Hajime and Minamino stood together before her. Minamino's mother observed that Hajime certainly knew how to speak properly. For a brief moment, Hajime felt as though he had become a salesman because every word came out with careful respect. Hajime admitted that proper manners had been drilled into him since childhood. Hajime also apologized if that sincerity sounded inauthentic, as he continued to bow with genuine respect. Ryoka looked at Hajime in silence as his honest words reached her without hesitation. Ryoka insisted that she had never meant to criticize Hajime and truly felt grateful. Minamino Ryoka even remarked that although Hajime and Minamino claimed to be friends, they would probably end up dating soon. Minamino reacted in complete disbelief and called out to her mother with surprise. Ryoka calmly concluded that Hajime had behaved well, and that much was clear to her. Ryoka quietly observed that Minamino had been coming home late recently. Ryoka wondered if Minamino had intentionally waited until she was away before inviting a boy into the house, and questioned whether that suspicion was wrong. Minamino quickly denied the misunderstanding. Minamino insisted that Hajime and Minamino were truly not in that kind of relationship. Hajime remained silent as Minamino struggled to explain. A nurse entered the room and informed everyone that visiting hours were almost over. Ryoka looked outside and admitted that she needed to change clothes, but it had already become very late. Ryoka quietly realized that only a little problem remained with her. Ryoka gathered her thoughts and quietly decided that in that case, she would find another way. Hajime stepped forward and asked Ryoka to accept whatever money Hajime had. Hajime promised that he would cover everything that remained and quietly asked whether that arrangement sounded acceptable. Ryoka suddenly paused and realized Hajime was still a high school student. Ryoka then wondered if Hajime should introduce his parents. Hajime gently answered that no parents were waiting for him because they had passed away in an accident. Hajime accepted that truth with a quiet smile, while Minamino fell silent after hearing his words. Quietly admitted that hearing those words made him feel sorry. Even so, he revealed that a fair amount of income still came from his job and investments. Hajime listened as Ryoka acknowledged that working so hard was admirable, yet accepting money from a child was simply too much for her to accept. Hajime gently handed over the phone and revealed the amount earned each month. That simple gesture showed the reality behind his calm words. Hajime watched in silence as Ryoka accepted the truth. She concluded that treating Hajime like a child would actually be far ruder after learning about his circumstances. Ryoka decided that the discussion would continue with Minamino because Ryoka would explain what Minamino needed. Minamino offered sincere thanks after hearing those words. Minamino accepted the answer with a quiet okay, while Hajime told Minamino that Hajime would wait in the hall. Hajime lowered his head with a quiet nod before turning away and leaving the room because Hajime had already promised to wait in the hall for Minamino. Hajime walked into the hallway with slow steps while silence settled around Hajime, and every thought remained hidden behind a composed expression. Ryoka called Minamino closer, because Minamino Ryoka wanted Minamino to come over for a second. Minamino admitted that bringing Hajime into the house had probably been a bad idea. Minamino insisted once again that Hajime and Minamino were not in that kind of relationship. Minamino also admitted that bringing a boy home had really happened and wondered why Ryoka looked so frightening. Ryoka immediately denied that assumption because that was not the issue at all. Minamino could only stare in complete surprise because Ryoka's reaction was nothing like what Minamino had expected. Ryoka raised a confident thumb and praised Minamino with heartfelt approval. Ryoka proudly congratulated Minamino and declared that Minamino had done well. Minamino could only respond with confused surprise because Ryoka's reaction completely caught Minamino off guard. Ryoka told Minamino to stop looking so dumbfounded, because this was no time to freeze in place. Ryoka declared that boys like Hajime only appeared once in a million. Ryoka warned Minamino not to fumble this chance, because another opportunity like this would never come again. Minamino could only repeat that Hajime truly was one in a million. Ryoka praised Hajime as sincere and kind and financially responsible. Ryoka admired that Hajime willingly spent his money to help other people. Ryoka confidently declared that once Hajime entered the adult world, women would surround Hajime in an instant. Ryoka urged Minamino to realize that truth before someone else claimed Hajime first. Ryoka accepted Hajime without hesitation and declared that having him visit anytime would be perfectly fine because the person was Hajime. Minamino could only call out to Ryoka in confusion because the sudden acceptance left her unable to understand what had just happened. A quiet smile slowly appeared on Minamino's face as the unexpected turn of events finally settled in her heart. Ryoka brushed everything aside and concluded that Minamino had worried over nothing while Minamino stumbled forward in surprise. The room fell into silence as the lingering mood remained between them without another word. Hajime called out with a quiet "hey" as Minamino turned toward him. Minamino told Hajime that Ryoka had finally fallen asleep and that she had even received paid leave. Hajime answered with a gentle "good," then handed the document over. Minamino thanked Hajime and admitted that she could never have handled all of this alone. Hajime smiled with quiet satisfaction and brushed the gratitude aside by telling her there was no need to worry. Hajime explained that his uncle had always taught him to use money properly to live well. Hajime admitted that doing something for her made him truly happy. Hajime admitted that honestly this still did not feel like enough to repay her. His thoughts returned to the day Minamino reached out to help him, and the feeling of gratitude remained firmly inside his heart. Minamino quietly wondered about repaying and let the unexpected words linger in her mind. Hajime turned back with a gentle expression and decided to go get a taxi for both of them. Hajime walked ahead through the station while the path before him stretched into the distance. Minamino quietly realized that Hajime truly was a kind person as that thought lingered in her heart. Minamino remembered Hajime looking troubled as though carrying burdens that no one else could see, and that memory remained clear in her mind. Minamino lifted a gentle smile as every memory of Hajime's kindness quietly gathered within her heart. She hurried after Hajime when he called for Minamino to come this way. Hajime noticed that she looked different and wondered what was wrong because her face had turned red. She quickly answered that everything was nothing. She quietly watched Hajime and found him so dependable. She realized that Hajime shined so brightly outside of school. Hajime seemed almost too bright for she to look at, and that quiet admiration continued to grow inside her. Next day, Hajime looked at the message from Minamino that told him Minamino mother could return home in 10 days. Hajime understood that 10 days felt like a long time because of the pneumonia and hoped Minamino would be able to endure until then. Minamino admitted that hunger had already started to bother her. Hajime invited Minamino to have a meal at his house if Minamino wanted. She accepted the invitation with bright excitement and hoped that joining Hajime would truly be possible. Hajime stood before the open refrigerator while deciding what meal to prepare. He quietly wondered what should be cooked before the ringing phone suddenly interrupted the thought. He noticed the incoming call and realized Minamino almost never called. He found the call unusual and accepted it without delay. Hajime answered with a simple greeting. Hajime had expected Minamino and listened as Ryoka apologized for causing trouble and asked Hajime to stop by again for another visit. Ryoka promised that any meal prepared for Hajime would be filled with care because Minamino was there today and would cook dinner. Minamino silently questioned why such a generous offer was being made. She insisted that the meal would be prepared with sincere affection. Minamino quickly stopped the unnecessary thoughts. Hajime quietly felt relieved that Ryoka seemed to be recovering well. He stood before the hospital room and quietly raised a hand toward the door. He paused for a brief moment before knocking without a word. The door suddenly swung open with force as a tall man rushed out of the room with determined steps. The hurried departure filled the hallway with heavy footsteps before the figure quickly disappeared. Hajime watched the man leave and quietly thought that whatever had happened inside must have been quite intense. He looked ahead while recalling Minamino and quietly realized that the man from earlier was most likely Minamino's father. He also admitted that the man was nothing like the image that had formed in mind. He studied every step and decided that lingering thoughts could wait. Ryoka welcomed Hajime into the room and apologized for calling him there. He answered that the visit was not a burden and did not mind at all. Ryoka gently asked whether Hajime was all right after hearing everything that had happened. The quiet concern carried through the room while he accepted every word. Ryoka apologized because uncertainty had made speaking difficult. She admitted that finding the right words had not been easy before finally deciding to speak. Ryoka remained silent for a moment as the weight of the situation settled across the room. Ryoka lowered the gaze and accepted that worry had reached the friend of Minamino. Ryoka believed every concern matched the painful truth and accepted being a failure as a mother. Hajime immediately denied those painful words and insisted that they were not true. He then apologized for speaking about matters beyond personal understanding and admitted knowing nothing about such hardships. Ryoka smiled softly because Hajime had spent so much time with Minamino. Ryoka believed Hajime should already understand that truth. Hajime quietly admitted not knowing what Ryoka meant and waited for the answer. Ryoka revealed that Minamino had always been very good at hiding true feelings behind a convincing smile. Hajime quietly realized that Minamino had already known the truth all along. Hajime admitted that such words might sound strange coming from someone so young. Hajime still believed Ryoka was not a bad mother and spoke those words without hesitation. Hajime declared that Minamino was a wonderful girl. Hajime acknowledged her beauty, yet believed true worth came from the heart. Hajime admired how well-mannered Minamino had become and respected how Minamino always stood against injustice toward others. Hajime explained that those wonderful traits existed because Ryoka had watched over Minamino until now. That was why Minamino had grown into the person she was today. Hajime lowered his head and urged Ryoka not to be so hard on herself. Ryoka accepted Hajime's words with gratitude and thanked him. Hajime remained standing near the doorway. Ryoka wondered whether Minamino had told Hajime about her father. Hajime admitted that Minamino had shared a little about him. Ryoka recalled how Minamino's father shouted that even though he yelled like that, he gave grace to himself and others while calling himself only a coward who feared being the bad guy. Hajime listened as Ryoka admitted that this was not something she should be telling him and offered an apology. She remained silent as those painful words lingered in Ryoka's heart and refused to disappear. She quietly admitted that Hajime was a curious person because Ryoka somehow found herself telling Hajime all sorts of things. Ryoka confessed that honesty felt easier now because Ryoka had heard a little about Hajime's family from Minamino. Ryoka wondered if growing up so fast had been difficult for him, while his silence became the only answer. He lowered his gaze as quiet thoughts crossed his mind. He admitted that it was not difficult. He believed growing up was much easier than holding on to being a kid. After that, the warm welcome reached him, and the food would be ready soon. Hajime excused himself and stepped into the apartment. Minamino asked if Ryoka had said anything weird, and Hajime answered that nothing strange had happened because they had only shared a normal conversation. Hajime quietly repeated that the conversation with Ryoka had been completely normal. The rich aroma drifted through the room as Hajime noticed something smelled delicious and wondered if it was curry. Minamino happily answered yes, because there was not a person alive who could screw this up, and her confidence filled the kitchen with bright energy. She set that aside and turned all attention toward him with quiet curiosity. She gently asked what him thought after showing the finished apron and waited for his honest impression. Hajime watched her standing before him in the apron as the soft fabric suited her naturally, and the graceful appearance quietly drew his attention without letting his thoughts drift away. Minamino looked at Hajime with sparkling anticipation and quietly asked how everything looked. He hesitated for a brief moment before admitting that she looked really cute, and the awkward agreement escaped naturally from his lips. Silence spread between them as neither of them found another word to follow the unexpected compliment. Hajime convinced himself that Minamino must have been disgusted and regretted speaking so honestly. Minamino quickly stopped Hajime before he could hide in the bathroom and revealed that happiness filled her heart because Hajime had praised her so casually. Her embarrassment only came from the unexpected compliment and not from dislike. Hajime's quiet look of surprise as the meal impressed him, and a simple sound of amazement escaped without restraint. Minamino tasted the curry with confidence because no one alive could ruin the recipe, and the result matched every expectation. Hajime accepted the plate from Minamino after hearing the meal was ready. Minamino enjoyed the curry with a quiet smile, while Hajime watched with relief that the food was well received. Hajime quietly washed the dishes. Minamino thanked him for cleaning, then wondered if Hajime had said something to Ryoka. Minamino fell silent as the phone screen came into view, while Hajime paused without another word. He admitted that nothing strange had been said to Ryoka. Minamino became certain that Hajime had talked with Ryoka. Minamino asked what Ryoka had said to Hajime because the conversation had continued to trouble her thoughts. Hajime looked at Minamino with quiet confusion and simply asked what she meant by that. Minamino finally revealed the question she had been holding back. Minamino wondered why Hajime called her mom by her first name while still calling her Minamino. Ryoka even called him by first name as well. Hajime fell silent as Minamino's question left him searching for an answer that would not hurt her feelings. Minamino slowly stepped closer while gathering quiet resolve and gently called Hajime by his first name. The simple way the name left Minamino's lips carried a warmth that softly reached Hajime's heart. Hajime froze after hearing Minamino call him by his first name. His thoughts came to a complete stop as surprise quietly took over. Hajime finally tried to answer by calling Minamino Chinatsu. Then hesitation returned, and the familiar honorific slipped back instead. The unfinished attempt revealed that Hajime had completely lost his composure. Hajime finally gathered enough courage to call her Chinatsu. The name left his lips with hesitation, while Minamino's warm smile quietly made the distance between them feel much smaller. Minamino smiled with quiet satisfaction, then gently called Hajime by his first name once more. Minamino asked what was wrong and patiently waited for his answer. The thought alone left him unable to stay calm. Hajime admitted that fear had started to grow because he thought everything might turn out exactly as Ryoka had predicted. She quickly caught that one detail and immediately asked what Ryoka had talked about with him. He hurried to explain that nothing strange had been discussed. He insisted the conversation had only been about ordinary things such as daily life and contact information. She bluntly concluded that Hajime was hiding something. He could only stand there as every attempt to keep the secret quietly fell apart. Ryoka smiled warmly as gratitude filled her heart. Ryoka felt thankful that Hajime stayed beside Minamino and hoped they would continue getting along well. She only asked that everything between them remained in moderation. Hajime could only remember the word moderation as it echoed through his mind and left him even more flustered. Minamino chased after Hajime with endless curiosity and urged him to reveal what Ryoka had said. Hajime firmly insisted that there was nothing to tell and refused to give away the conversation. Next day, the ordinary school day quietly continued while the secret remained safely with him. He quietly reflected that talent and effort could lead to success. He also believed that without knowing the right moment to act, every chance would lose its meaning. One of Minamino's classmates noticed that Minamino had been going straight home lately. The classmate bluntly asked if Minamino had found a boyfriend. Minamino stood quietly with a gentle smile while the peaceful mood around her remained unchanged. The unexpected question spread through the classroom and caught everyone's attention. Hajime also turned toward Minamino as he quietly waited to hear her answer. Minamino cheerfully revealed that Ryoka had been hospitalized. She treated the situation lightly because there was no reason to worry. The classmates reacted with surprise. One wondered if trouble always seemed to follow Minamino, while another thought the situation sounded unbelievable after everything that had already happened. Minamino assured everyone that a dependable friend stayed by her side. That support gave Minamino confidence that everything would be all right. Hajime silently realized that Minamino had been spending every day with him. That simple truth lingered in his thoughts long after the conversation moved on. Minamino teased Hajime by calling him the reliable boy who had been listening to the conversation. She then asked what was planned for dinner that night. He answered that dinner would be pork belly with cabbage, using the remaining ponzu sauce. The simple menu immediately caught Minamino's interest. She praised Hajime's cooking and admitted that his skills had improved. She even wondered if anyone could keep up with him, before joking that Hajime's talent was almost frustrating. Minamino suggested shopping together after school. He readily agreed, and she decided to change into different clothes at Hajime's home before they left together. Hajime quietly admitted that he had already grown used to both sides of Minamino. The thought lingered in Hajime's mind as the classroom buzzed with conversation. Hajime tried to send another message by replacing Minamino with Chinatsu. The first message was rejected before the new version finally felt right to Hajime. She received the message and softly confessed that hearing him call her Chinatsu always made her happy. The simple words carried a quiet warmth that stayed in Hajime's heart. Minamino noticed that Hajime had suddenly lowered his head onto the desk. Minamino gently asked what was wrong and wondered why Hajime looked so defeated. Hajime answered with a short message and admitted that the reason was already obvious. Hajime quietly asked Minamino not to question what both of them already understood. Hajime reminded her to put the phone away and spend time talking with friends instead. Minamino cheerfully replied that she would talk later before walking away. Minamino left with a gentle smile after promising that they would talk later. He rested his head on the desk and quietly repeated that they would talk later. The words lingered in Hajime's mind as thoughts refused to settle. A distant memory surfaced before Hajime. The image reminded him of the quiet moment shared with Minamino. He finally understood that the chance had already been there. He realized that moment had probably been the right time for a confession. He quietly wondered what name could truly describe the relationship shared with Minamino. He returned to the present while the classroom remained filled with ordinary conversations. Even surrounded by everyone, Hajime stayed lost in thought. He accepted that timing could decide everything in life. He believed that those who failed to seize the right moment were often left behind and called losers.